Okay, good morning, everybody. We are live. Thank you for being flexible on the staff meeting schedule. Meeting on Monday and meeting early. We appreciate everybody. And lot to cover today. So Tom, why don't you take it away?
Okay, we're going to try to do four things today. The first two items are discussions on capital programs for the county. One is Dr. Shelley is here. We've been trying for a while to do, she needs an increase of space there for her operations. So I think just an update today, and I think wherever Andrew went behind me, Andrew and Dr. Stedman will co-present there to some degree. Then the other capital issue is relatively new, and this is the discussion of a ComCare campus. I'll give credit to facilities here, especially Andrew, who's kind of been looking at ways to get the county out of all these numerous leases that we historically have had. And so he's given some thought to a campus, and Joan and her team are here today to talk about operationally what that could look like. So those are the capital issues. And Lindsay, anything else on capital that we need to talk about today? So those are the two issues. And then we have brought back in, or will bring back in, Laura Forshee, who's the 911 director, and Kevin Lannerman and his team from EMS to kind of just look at their decisions. Those were the two big lifts in the budget. So we want to bring them back and let commission ask some questions and get into a little bit of weeds there on operationally what this does for them. So those are the four items. We'll start with Andrew. Will you go first, or who? We'll talk about Regional Forensic Science Center first.
Hey, Dr. Stedman, good morning.
Good morning, Shelley from the Regional Forensic Science Center, the director there. And I was asked to give just a recap of some of the information that we previously discussed. So I'm going to start by talking about how things are divided up in our state. If you think about the crime lab services in the state of Kansas, about 60% of those services are provided by the KBI. About 20% here in Sedgwick County, and the other 20% in Johnson County, those main metropolitan areas of our state. Keep in mind that the KBI does not provide any coroner services. They do not perform autopsies there. That is all provided by Sedgwick County, Johnson County, and one private company up in Northeast Kansas. But if you look at the distribution of crime in our state, 40% of the violent crimes occur in Sedgwick County metropolitan area. So while we have 20% of the population, we produce 40% of the criminal evidence in the state here in Sedgwick County. And now let's look at the footprint of the laboratories that are providing that service. Just under 50% of the square footage is inhabited by the KBI staff, about 40% by Johnson County, and 13% is here in Sedgwick County. So we're operating in 31,000 square feet. We're serving essentially 40% of the violent crime in Kansas. So if you look at Johnson County, their medical examiner's office is bigger than our whole entire operation, which houses both the crime lab and the medical examiner's office. They do about 30% the number of autopsies we do. And they have a separate crime lab that's twice our size. And the KBI, again, I only included square footage here for their headquarters and their main lab in Great Bend that provides DNA services. They do have a small footprint in Kansas City and an even smaller one in Pittsburgh. So I guess take-home message here is we're doing a whole lot of work in very little space. And even if you consider the space we're going to add, we won't come close to our colleagues in the state of Kansas. So this all started in 2014. We began to recognize as the state was looking to expand services for sexual assault evidence kits And as toxicology was really moving into technology that uses liquid chromatograph, tandem mass specs, those have very special environmental control needs. And those are essentially now in a very small room with an external cooling system because our legacy building cannot accommodate those in the main toxicology laboratory. We had in 2010 expanded into an annex area that added about 7,500 square feet, mainly for drug ID and evidence. And when that happened, we moved our DNA section into what was the evidence vault. Not everybody fits in there, so we put some people in different parts of the building. And we really started looking at what our space needs would be. And in 2014, we had a two-story design. And things really didn't move along after that initial design until 2020, when I began to work with Rusty on the current design that we came, which actually realized funding for a build in the 2024 budget. However, as we all know, we were not able to acquire the property that we needed to accommodate that building. And so we started a new space study because if you think of our plan that began in 2014 was supposed to last us for 10 or 15 years, and we're already 10 years past that beginning point. So what I realized was this wasn't going to be enough space to meet our needs for very long into the future. And so we did a new space study, and that's kind of where we are today. Some of the things to keep in mind is that we have realized some backlogs, both in toxicology and drug ID. We don't need for those to increase. We need to keep up with the recommended standards for not only DNA testing, but for quality control. And also, we're becoming very limited for our ability to expand in the instrumentation and the services that we provide. We cannot add people. I currently have very difficult time accommodating interns. And so leveraging new technology advancements has definitely become a challenge. And so I'm going to let Andrew now talk a little bit about the way forward and what that plan looks like.
Okay, good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Andrew Dilts, Director of Facilities. So as Shelley said, we do have an approved CIP that was approved in 2023. So right now we currently have approximately $7 million in the CIP fund for expanding forensic science. What we've revised is for 2026, it's a new CIP request that will construct a facility on adjacent county-owned property. The budget that we're looking at for this CIP is just over 1.2 million for A&E design in 2026. And then we would have just over 19 million for construction in 2027. A portion of that budget does include remodeling the existing forensic science center. The new building will include space for DNA, firearms, drug ID, and fire debris laboratories, allowing the existing DNA lab to be repurposed for tox, medical investigations, and autopsies. The new building will modernize DNA workflow, accommodate robotics, and improve casework analysis. And the remodel will address space and ventilation issues in tox and storage limitations within tox in the morgue. Forensic science over the next 20 years, currently they have 43 FTEs, and they're projected to grow to 50 to 60 total over the next 20 years. The existing building, the capacity for electrical circuit service there is maxed out, so we're limited there as well. This would include backup generators and UPSs for all the critical systems in the new addition. And we would build common spaces such as janitor closets, mechanical rooms, corridors. That's all included in the programming and our circulation factor. We will have a parking space for a golf cart-sized vehicle to transport evidence back and forth between the two buildings, and a small garage with parking and unloading space at the new building. Here's an aerial map of the existing location there on the northwest corner. And then we would build Caddy Corner, which is directly north of the health department in the health department parking lot. And I will stand for any questions.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. Appreciate it. And I appreciate the recap, Dr. Stedman, of what we went through. CIP, there will be a couple of questions. Let me just make one overarching comment that was very prevalent, I thought, as Dr. Stedman was going through her analysis. Is over and over in 2.5 years since I've been at the county here, we see that, especially when we compare ourselves to our neighbors in the Northeast, that we operate very lean, sometimes with less resources, and yet our outputs and what we do and what we perform at are exceptional. And I think by and large, that's a good standard. Is we are very efficient, we are very lean, and I'll take that to bat with anyone in the community that challenges that. And that's a good thing, right up to the point that it impacts your level of service and your ability to remain efficient in your operations. And we have some examples of that we're seeing now up and down the chart here at Sedgwick County with several departments. This is one of them. So I'm going to support this on the CIP because it's needed, because it is impacting their efficiency, their operations. It's a big deal. And I know what we've had this conversation in the 2.5 years that I've been here. We've had this conversation a number of times, and I'm excited to try to push something across the finish line here because I know they need it. I toured recently. It's a desperate need. Lindsay, is this, remind us on the CIP, when is this? Is this a 26? Okay, this is a 26.
So because this has already been authorized for the $7 million, we're basically just re-estimating the total project cost. And so it is anticipated that the work would begin. I did want to just correct one thing. We don't have any funds set aside for this yet. This will be bond funded at the end. We plan to issue this bond in 2028 after all of the work is actually complete and we know the grand total on the costs. And so I say that, but also you might recall during our conversations about this, we had originally estimated the amount that Andrew had included, that 7 million. But because we are no longer anticipating to do any additional administrative building debt, we are reallocating that bond funding to this. So this project actually is not going to increase your financial forecast. We're just changing how we're planning to spend that debt service, if that helps at all.
It does. Yeah, certainly does. Okay, commissioners, any questions or comments here? Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Just curious, out of the 19 million, if you were to break that down, how much is for the existing facility versus the new facility?
So we are still trying to develop what the remodel is going to look there. So basically I've plugged in an allowance. We're estimating remodeling 50% of the existing facility. I have the square footage of the existing facility at 31,800 square feet. We're estimating $250 a square foot remodel, which is a little bit higher typically than for remodel costs. And that's due to the ventilation issues and requirements that we have to have for that equipment. And so we're estimating approximately $4 million, have an allowance of $4 million to remodel the existing building.
And it's 31,000 feet roughly.
Correct. Close to 32, but yes.
The new facility is going to be how large?
The new facility is right at almost 25,000 square feet.
So the number, this 19,117,956, very specific number. I assume that's a calculation based on how many square feet we think we're creating.
So without getting too detailed, our estimate for the new building is just over 11 million. We have a lot of incidentals regarding the architect, project contingency, equipment, FF&E, things of that nature that get built into that are incidentals in addition to the new construction and the remodel costs.
Just another thought. I mean, the location, in my opinion, is, if I was going to pick a location to make an RFSC, spend this kind of money, is that the right location for this long term?
I think the two buildings being in close proximity, Shelley can make that work with her and her team. I have not, we've not been in, nobody's indicated to us that we cannot make this work. Now, I think ideally it would all be on the same, building, right? It wouldn't be split by a city street. But we don't really have an option to expand unless we want to go back to the drawing board and look at moving forensic science out of this existing location and find a centralized location where both buildings can be one.
If I can add some color to that, my cab actually, when we toured, this was a discussion, could it be possible to consolidate? And part of the discussion we had was the level of sunk cost we had into this building now that they have significant investment in this current building, that trying to move all of that and abandon that would be a betrayal on some sunk costs that we have in there. So that we have this conversation too, to see if that might be a better space, but if there might be a better option to consolidate elsewhere, but we have sunk cost into this building.
I don't know if it's appropriate for Dr. Stedman or Andrew to reference this, but there's specialized ventilation.
Yeah,
To your
that's right.
point about sunk costs and
Refrigeration and
some of the things that have been uniquely set up for this building. We just did the annex, I think, and I'm trying to look 2013, 2010. Okay, longer ago than I thought. So yeah, there's been quite a bit invested in this facility thus far.
I guess just some of the other thought was any chance of, I guess, I know that being in one location is ideal. But if you were to divide the RFSC into two, like DNA / ballistics testing or whatever from say autopsies, I'm just making an example here. Maybe this building would be better for autopsies, and another building could be anywhere, could do the other stuff that's really unrelated to autopsies, perhaps. I mean, just wondering if there's any thought to that. We're investing that kind of money in this location. That just makes me wonder a little bit.
One reason that we decided to take the forensic science disciplines out and all but toxicology is because the better portion of the toxicology workload is the postmortem work that they do. So the samples are taken from the decedents. Those biological specimens are submitted to the toxicology for the drug analysis. And so those operations, since they work so closely together, could remain at that site. We will still receive the evidence from law enforcement at the secondary site, and they do test drivers for impairment. So we will have to manage submitting that evidence over to the toxicology laboratory. But otherwise, there's not, as far as autopsy services go, the interaction with the crime laboratory is much more limited than it is with tox. So that was our process for deciding which disciplines would be where. And my understanding is a lot of our computer internet services are already tied into the health department. I know when their power's out, we don't have any internet. So I know that that line comes right through that property. So hopefully that will facilitate having it at that site versus maybe west of the existing building. And then also we would have the cost of additional land.
Thank you, Sally. I was going to ask, do we own the land where it's going to go now? Or do we have to
Correct. So
purchase?
where that blue rectangle is, that entire block all the way to the south, that is the current East 9th Health Department.
Oh, okay.
So the building to the south is the health department. The north part is the parking lot, and we would basically construct this building in the parking lot of East 9th. And there's another CIP that will basically take health department out of that building and potentially move them into the KU Med Center after KU Med vacates and moves into the biomed.
And so we have parking addressed since we're going to be in the parking lot.
We do have another parking lot east of East 9th Street, east of that building. There at the very south side. I think you can see it there in the picture. But I also think that we're also looking to move health department out of this building. So I don't think it'll be a conflict once health is out of the building.
Okay. So we do own the current footprint.
And
Okay.
Tim can speak to it also, but that back lot, part of that is currently has temporary outbuildings that have been there forever. So they're permanent temporary outbuildings for storage for health department. So some of it is parking within a fenced area, and then some of it is outbuildings to use to store health materials. And I think we can manage all that. By the time we get around to building this building in the next couple of years, hopefully some of the transfer to the KU Med and others, some of those things, those moving parts will be in action, and
more question.
Sure.
Just trying to, so we're looking at 20,371,000 because it's architectural fees plus construction. Is that right, Andrew?
That would be correct.
Okay. And then how many square foot exactly are we looking at? I'm trying to just identify a price per square foot.
So the new building would be 24,600 square feet. And then we would remodel a portion of the existing building, which is approximately 16,000 square feet.
And that's with the equipment too, then?
Yeah, so that our numbers are total project cost. So it's going to include contingency that we hopefully don't have to dip into. It's going to include FF&E. It's going to be the utility services, the architect and engineering. We have a factor in here for inflation over the next couple of years as well. We've allowed movers. It's everything. Our total estimate is all inclusive. We do not anticipate coming back to you and asking for more money.
Since there is so much specialized equipment, do you have a carve out so we can better understand like just the shell, what you're estimating for that?
Yeah, I can certainly provide that.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm trying to identify.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Commissioner Howell.
Just on the new building alone, maybe I'm way off, but I think I calculated $440 a square foot for all of the contingency, FF&E and everything.
And that is going to be due to the amount of ventilation and requirements circuitry that they need for their equipment to run, in that it's very specialized. So the building is going to be built to accommodate their equipment.
The remodeling costs for the existing building is $250 a square foot, and the construction costs and furnishing everything for the new building is about $440 a square foot. Am I close?
Perhaps I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I'll have to run those.
Just a comment. This is more for commissioners, I guess. I see these comparisons to Johnson County. It's like another planet up there. I'm sorry. Their budget, I just looked it up again. Their current budget now is $1.9 billion. Johnson County, and current population is based on quick search just a minute ago. There are 80,000 more population than we have in Central County. It's 80,000 more people and a $1.9 billion budget. So if you just do the quick calculations, their spending is 2.7 times per person what we spend here in Sedgwick County. I'm saying, we're still getting the job done. So I'm very proud. Sedgwick County has been a very conservative county. When you want to compare us with Johnson County, I don't want to be like them. I want them to be like us. Now, I don't want to be so cheap we don't get the job done. So I want to make sure we get the job done. But so whatever's needed, that's the very important word, needed. I want to support what's needed. But $19 million, I just choke a little bit. That is a number that I was hoping we would not see that high of a number. I'm trying to solve this. I guess I'm concerned at the magnitude of this. I'm wondering what time will the commissioners have a chance to weigh into the actual plan to hopefully review whether or not we can find any ways of making this a little bit less painful. I mean, I want to do something that's needed. I just don't want to be like Johnson County, and I don't want to, build a building that's. I'll give you an example. When they built their admin building up there, they made it artistic. Okay, it wasn't just functional; it was above and beyond. Okay, and that's what they do up there. So again, I want to be functional. I want to provide adequate space. But I don't want it to be curved walls and 12-foot ceilings either. So I hope that makes sense.
Having worked through this process with Dr. Stedman and Andrew and the architects, there are no artistic qualities. There is no excess architectural design in this building. Shelley's very conscientious about trying to keep things, number one, build them in a way that will allow accreditation and review by the FBI that we meet the standards of a laboratory, a forensic laboratory, to ensure that as evidence comes through there and people's lives depend on being found innocent or guilty based on the science, that the Science Center does not come into a position of scandal because of inadequate facilities, corrupt evidence, etc. So she's trying to build it to a standard that meets the scientific requirements without being extravagant or necessarily costly. And I've been with them through this whole process, so I'm confident that excesses are not built into these numbers. On the flip side, not really trying to compare to Johnson County in that we want to be like Johnson County. I think she's trying to demonstrate that the amount of money that they spend to manage their newly formed district coroner's office, the autopsy stuff that they do, and their forensic lab is pretty extravagant given the size of their crime problem. We have 40% of the violent crime, and I think probably about 40% of the statewide crime in general, property and otherwise, because the DNA lab does get cases in that relate to non-violent crimes and other cases. But our facilities are extremely small, efficient financially comparatively speaking, in spite of the large caseload that we manage here. So I think the comparison is not to say we need to be like Johnson County, is to say our caseload is so much higher that we need to expand our space, but we will still be smaller and more efficient than Johnson. And that's kind of what she said in her presentation. And I want to be clear that not trying to be like Johnson County, she's trying to demonstrate that she's going to manage a caseload significantly higher than theirs, still do it in a smaller footprint in a more efficient way. That makes sense.
Yes. I'd just like to say again, I think we all expect us to do things in a way that we can withstand any court challenges on any data that comes out of this. And I think that's always been a standard that we would always support. But the approach to this, then it just seems from my perspective, a little bit arbitrary not to know how these numbers were derived. I mean, it'd be nice to say, an autopsy room that can handle this many people, being processed in and out of that facility in some time period. We need a certain amount of space to do those. In other words, there ought to be a basis for how large that room is that's reasonable. We're not, so in other words, if you approach this like, well, we need this, when you highlight the things you actually have to have, and you just have justification, and you develop, if you will, a size. But we start something like a project, the way it's been presented is almost backwards. You just start with the size and have no idea what's in the building. And so to me, if it was calculated based on need, it'd be nice to say, these are the things we're trying to do here, and these are the reasons why we come up with this much space. And that would make more sense to me. But right now we just say we need a large building, and I have no idea exactly why.
I can provide that documentation to you. We sat down with an architect and walked through the needs, the existing footprint of what they have, how they operate, and the need for each itemized area of forensic science. And we have that documentation. That's what this was based off of.
And again, if that's the way this process has gone, that's very good. And I guess I'd like to have, some awareness of exactly how we got to these numbers. That's all. Thank you.
Andrew, real quick, and the on-call architect provided you with the estimates that you have here in front of you.
That is correct. All these costs came from the architect, and then we adjusted them for inflation, our project contingency, and some of the incidentals that are outside of the construction costs.
Will much of the current equipment be utilized or be able to be transferred, or is some of it reached its usable life, or is it no longer going to be a good fit for the new building? Just trying to understand some of that.
Most of the analytical equipment for the crime lab will be relocated. There are some things we cannot easily relocate, or that it doesn't make good sense. The firearms tank, for example, it was given to us by the KBI to replace our previous tank when they upgraded, and it's starting to degrade. And so moving that would be not only extremely difficult, but it wouldn't serve us long-term over there. So there's some of those decisions that need to be made. And I'm hoping that any additional DNA equipment, should the capacity enhancement grant continue as it has historically, we should be able to use some of that money for the equipment in the new DNA laboratory. We've tried to be very smart about how we're repurposing the space. Most of the new space is for a drug identification laboratory. However, because they've had pills and powders out in that laboratory now for 15 years, It's not an exceptionally great space to put your toxicology lab in where you are looking for very small quantities of drugs, because essentially those ducts have been exposed to those drugs for now 15 years. So we have special considerations for either cleaning or replacing that ductwork so that we're not pushing powders into the analytical space. We're testing for those very analytes. So hopefully that speaks towards the instrumentation. There's just some things that can't be relocated or that are going to be used by the autopsy folks when we abandon that space. And just to give a little bit more information about the process, this isn't a guess. There's a lot of care that was taken by our architect to walk into every single space in our current location and say how many people are here, how many people need to be here in the next however many years, and then they use standards for creating estimates of what that space need is. I also provided them with the national recommendations for laboratory space. There is a publication that says every DNA analyst should have this much horizontal square footage for managing their cases. And so those are the types of standards that were used to develop this estimate for space.
Dr. Steadman, real quick, I noticed there's no, with the amount of work that your staff is doing, there's no decision package for any additional FTEs. Am I correct in that? I mean, this is what you believe will help solve some of the backlog problems, some of the space issues, some of the efficiency issues is space, not as much staff. Am I reading into that correctly? Or is there maybe next year a decision package coming on the staff?
Well, our directive was that if we couldn't give something up or have a reduction in costs, that we couldn't ask for anything to be added. So no, I've not asked for any additional staff. I will point out, though, that the commissioners were generous in adding some pathology staff that we've needed. We have added a medical investigator because we provide 24/7 service and we weren't able to do that. And we did add a pathology assistant since I've been the director. So we have had a couple of positions added in the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay. Commissioner Watts?
Question for Andrew. I think when we look at these CIP numbers, they're just always really big, right? And so I'm wondering, is it possible that to look at these more broken out where we have on a new build, we have a shell cost, we have a finish cost, and then an FF&E line. So we can see exactly what the construction numbers that you're pitching, how they're broken out.
Absolutely.
I don't want to cause more work, but I think that would help all of us understand, especially with something that's so specialized. Yeah. That we need to understand that part of it too. So just a suggestion with some of these new builds coming up.
Yeah, we can provide that
a lot.
cost.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Steadman or Andrew? Very good. Thank you. Talking ComCare?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Andrew Diltz, Director of Facilities here to talk ComCare. You do have 2 PowerPoints in front of you. The colored one is what's going to be on the screen here. The black and white one has some additional information that was provided by Joan. So at a high level, this CIP request will take all of ComCare programs with the exception of those in the new ComCare crisis building and place them into one facility or one campus. This would reduce 4 long-term leases and free space in the Ronald Reagan building. And this request aligns with the county lease philosophy. Some of the concerns that we've had with leases over the years. We don't own the asset. The lease costs continue to arise. Maintenance, upkeep, and responsiveness to facility to begin to decline over time. In some instances, the landlord does not want to renew with ComCare because of the program clientele. In some instances, ComCare does not want to renew the lease at the location because of suitability of space. And the ComCare programs are spread across the county due to space availability at the time. Here is the locations, a map of all the ComCare programs as they stand today. The offender program lease and community crisis center, those will come together when the new crisis building is built. But all the rest will remain at those existing locations. Our total annual cost in ComCare leases today is $1,081,423. Of that, about $47,000 is for the scope lease, which will go away when the new ComCare crisis building is built. So we'll still have approximately $1,040,000 a year in annual lease costs as it stands today. The budget for the CIP is based on the acquisition of land or an existing building in 2026. We've allocated just over $2 million. We are asking for in 2027, the following year, architectural and engineering design at just over $2.4 million. And we'd like to construct this or start construction in 2028. The facility would be just over 80,000 square feet at $350 per square foot for a total construction budget of just over $35 million. The earliest we could consider building is with our lease expirations is 2028. That's when our first lease expires, which is out at Harry Street Mall. We do have a lease at North Amadon that is currently annual, and we're working on locking that in for the next 3 years. So there's not a potential there that we might be on the street. And I will stand for any questions, and Joan and her team are here as well.
Okay. Okay, commissioners, any questions? And again, Joan is here, and so is Jennifer Wilson. She's here too, so and Chantel's here. Everybody, the whole team's here. So, okay.
Those up, while she's pulling those up, I just want to clarify that all the processes and the conversations that Shelley referenced regarding space have all taken place too, as we've met with people. They've calculated our needed space based on the services we deliver and the programs that we would consolidate into that one location. So I just wanted to quickly do a quick ComCare overview because I think it's important to understand our role as a CMHC and then also our role as a CCBHC. So we have to be a CMHC to be a CCBHC. We are one of 26 community mental health centers in the state of Kansas and one of 25 CCBHCs in the state of Kansas. We provide direct services to members of our community, regardless of ability to pay. So we are the financial safety net for the community.
Hey, Joan, are we on, this would be commissioners, where it says ComCare Complex, I think
On page
page
3.
3. Yeah.
I think it's also important to recognize that while we do deliver a lot of services in the community, we also have a lot of office-based services in terms of therapy and substance use groups and those sorts of things. And I'll talk a little bit more about the staffing pattern and such in a moment. We are predominantly revenue-based versus property tax. Andrew showed you the 7 locations. We're all over the place. Right now, we're separated based on population, which made sense at the time. Doesn't make sense as we've moved forward and tried to become an evidence-based, visible service organization in the community. So we serve over 12,000 individuals a year with a lot of services to those individuals. We are staffed by a lot of specialty trained positions like psychiatrists, licensed clinicians. We've talked about staffing over time because you guys have helped support some addition to our staffing. We've got mid-level practitioners who are also delivering medication management services. We've got a lot of bachelor degree staff doing case management and other specialized work supporting those individuals we serve. We've got care coordinators, which are the foundation of a CCBHC, and they're the ones that are kind of trying to connect people to other services and supports in the community, and really a foundational need for our population that have trouble navigating different systems. We've got billing staff, we've got quality management staff, we have leadership staff, and we have peer support individuals, and those are folks with lived experience. So we've got a wide breadth of services as a community mental health center, and all of that underlies who we are as this certified community behavioral health clinic. But there's more expectations as a community behavioral health clinic, and access, outcomes, and patient experience are three of those key requirements. And then we are clearly, as a CCBHC, a very specialized services. So it's part of mainstream healthcare, but we're a specialty provider. It also requires enhanced partnerships with law enforcement, a focus on making available to veterans if they can't get their services at the VA, that we're there to provide some services. We do want to be an employer of choice because our arena is fraught with staffing challenges. There are just not a lot of behavioral health professionals out there. And then you limit that pool even further because a lot of people want to become private practitioners. I was at Walmart this weekend and I was talking to a young going into senior high school, going into being a senior in high school. And he's like, I said, what do you want to study? And he says, oh, I want to study psychology. And I said, oh, that's great. Have you thought about public sector work where you work with the most vulnerable population? He says, oh, no, my mentor told me become an independent private practitioner. So, I mean, we are fighting that drive that's being communicated out there in the world that, you know, private practice is the way to go. And we need our private practitioners, but they're serving a different clientele than we are at ComeCare. And so when I talk about staffing, yes, there's people graduating in our field, but the people that want to work with this population in a public sector world is much smaller, and it's a challenge. And that's on top of the national shortage of behavioral health specialists we already know about, including psychiatrists and clinicians. But we're also seeing it in the integrated care specialists. Those are our case management bachelor level folks. There's just a wealth of opportunities outside of here that they can do that's not as difficult. So being a CCBHC requires that we be able to meet the demand of the community. And then recruit and retention just in general is just a big piece. So part of being a community behavioral health clinic is also having inviting spaces, healing spaces, because it's a center of excellence. And to be a center of excellence, you have to have a presence. And safe spaces. We have a changing population. We have folks who are coming into our buildings who are using substances of which we don't know, and then they're acting out aggressively toward our staff. We don't have a lot of confinement areas or safety mechanisms in our facilities right now for staff or for the patients themselves. And then we have to demonstrate our performance as a CCBHC. And I think the most important thing is we're in an era where we're modernizing behavioral health care services. This is happening all over the country. It's a big thing in our state, and certified behavioral health clinics are that driving force. So on the next sheet, I just provided you some reference information. This is information we submitted earlier this year, earlier this year. So I'm sorry, time frame gets away from me when we started having the conversations regarding putting it as a CIP project this year. But this is just some content that we had shared. And really, it all focuses on the fact that we don't have a lot of efficiencies when we're spread out in 7 locations, and staff and patients are driving all over the place to get the services they need. And they're certainly not healing environments right now. So we see lots of opportunities. We talk about this all the time within our own team meetings, and we hear it from our staff during employee experience surveys. Is we are a large organization and our staff are spread out all over the place. That leaves us with very limited opportunities for administrative efficiencies. And it also lends toward an environment of uncertainty and angst for staff. There's not the same ability to plan when you don't own your own facilities and we're subject to the will of the owner, the landlord. So some of the efficiencies include long-term stability, improved facility maintenance. I could speak about this all day long, but when you're in somebody else's property and they're trying to be efficient and save funding, or they're having financial problems, there's delays in improving the environment. We have had times when we have no heat for an entire winter or no air conditioning for an entire summer. Offices at 54 degrees or 90 degrees aren't very comfortable to work in, and that's what our staff and our patients are experiencing. It's very difficult. And when we go back to that retention piece, work environment's an important part of why people come to work. And if they're not comfortable and they can go somewhere else, they do. Scheduling and training improvements. Right now, we have to plan for scheduling training and doing training. If we're all in one location, we have opportunity to do on-the-spot training. This includes, and I say that in terms of specialty things, like if somebody needs support, their supervisor, and need HR support, and our HR staff are on site. Boy, you could do a momentary quick conversation or problem solving right there rather than having to schedule a meeting to do so. Same with IT support. They can help somebody navigate the software they have to use to do their work. How do you use the electronic health record? Same with clinical support or quality improvement support. Somebody may be struggling and trying to figure out, gosh, I don't know what to do with this patient. A lot more supervisors and a lot more support on staff to do that than when we're spread out and all over the place and trying to do phone tag or Zoom meetings and those sorts of things. We right now have staff that work at multiple locations. They're driving back and forth. All of us in leadership roles are driving from one facility to another for our meetings. All of that, when you take into consideration that you have to go down to Harry Street or out to Brittany Center at Woodlawn and 21st, that's adding to and from an hour more to a meeting than if you were just on site and able to maximize that time. So it can add some administrative efficiencies for us as well. But I think more importantly, when I talk about that is staff like to see leadership. They like visibility. And right now we don't have the greatest opportunity to do that. It has to be intentional, and we have to plan to go out to one of those locations. The same with billing staff. Patients have questions regarding billing, and right now, if they're over at outpatient services, for example, seeing a therapist and they're wondering, what's my copay? And the front desk doesn't have access to that, or what is my balance? I want to pay it off. They have to call the billing staff where they'd be right on staff and could just walk over and take care of that. So lots of opportunities there. But I think even more so is that enhanced communication between the different departments. And we have right now, like I say, all of our services are siloed in different locations, and it takes a long time to learn what those services are. So you may be working with a youth and you recognize that mom or dad or guardian needs some support as well. And you have to figure out how to get them to outpatient services, and then they have to find another location to do that. Here, it could be all inclusive and integrated and just more patient-centric. I think the other piece is being together as staff. It just changes the dynamics of communication. People, when they work and see each other, have a different way of communicating than when they're just picking up a phone or meeting with somebody on a Zoom meeting. It's just a natural occurring thing. We have the opportunity for shared supported services or staffing. For example, we have limited nursing. And this would spread nursing over all of our programs rather than having to isolate them to one program just because of proximity. It also allows for greater alignment in messaging and communication. I think people like to know that they're hearing the same thing somebody else is. And this is an opportunity for us to do that. It provides significant efficiencies in terms of cross-training possibilities. Instead of being a children's therapist, maybe we look at these are comp care therapists, or, rather than being this person in this location, you're a comp care employee. It just gives us lots of opportunity. Andrew spoke to this, no landlords. We would have an asset. I think, for us, a lot of our spaces that we are leasing now have significant environmental issues. Not of least is the change of ownership in these buildings, and the change of response to our needs. Maintenance is deferred on everything all the time. We moved into a location recently that all of a sudden, a month later, we learned that they are trying to sell the building because they can't afford it. And that's maintenance stopped completely. And then there's space constraints in a lot of our space and safety issues that we're really concerned about. But I think for me, the important piece on these opportunities on the administrative side is being together just creates a different environment and it gives an opportunity to present ourselves as one to the community. People, including the commission, say, I don't understand this, or tell me about this about ComCare. Well, being in 14 different locations, actually just 7, creates some issues regarding branding. We don't have a brand. You look back here, not a single building looks like another building, and the face of the buildings are not our faces. We're part of a building that other people are in. That just doesn't give us the opportunity to tell our story or market ourselves in an effective way. And that's concerning to me, because with behavioral health becoming more mainstream and more people seeking it, we want to make it, again, back to that CCBHC piece. Access is really important, and ease of access is important. But I think the most significant benefit of consolidating our services into a single location is that it's a more integrated approach and a more friendly approach for those we serve. We work with a difficult clientele. Like I say, they have trouble with transportation and navigation. What are you laughing at, Rusty? No. And, if somebody needs to get therapy and they also want to have a medication appointment or pick up their meds, they're going to 2 different locations, and that's not very customer friendly. But I think we can also, in a single location, do much better with warm handoffs and trying to convince somebody that is struggling with a mental health issue that may also have a substance use issue to accept both sets of services is much more limited when you're spread out. But if you can walk them down the hall and do warm introductions, it might be that with time they may recognize that, it's not a bad place to get services. Maybe I'll take advantage of that opportunity. But I do think of the families, that many families have multiple people in services, and just to get them in one location makes much more sense. Care coordination would be much more improved, because not only would they be on site, but they can be visible and accessible to somebody entering the building, having a new intake, coming from a med appointment, much easier to connect that person in the moment rather than playing, again, phone tag trying to catch up with somebody after a referral from a provider. It also provides, I mentioned this before, a much more integrated approach to care. And then a more modern facility, as I mentioned, changes behavior and the value that patients and staff perceive. I will say, when we've moved from location and tried to upgrade to a different location, patient behavior does change. Staff behavior does change. There's pride in workplace. Some of our buildings are pretty darn old. There's not a lot of pride. Staff just come to work, and when they work there, because that's where they're assigned. And then I think the other piece of a more modern facility that meets our needs communicates to the person that we're serving that they're important and valued. And we already have a population of folks that feel disenfranchised. And sometimes our buildings don't give that sense of warmth. And, you know, space in terms of you walk down a hall and the hallway's this wide, not very comfortable. You're not walking side by side. Somebody's taking the lead. Where it would be much nicer to walk side by side, have conversation, because a lot of times that conversation when you're walking somebody from the front of a building to a service location is the most important piece of that interaction. That's where the engagement occurs for what's going to occur once they hit the service area. And one thing that's a big note that we've identified is we have an on-site pharmacy that's at our adult medical services that is amazing, and handles a bulk of our medication services, pharmacy needs, but it's not accessible to children's services that's way out at 21st and Woodlawn. And it would be so much easier for that person to pick up their medications from a pharmacy that's on site when they're receiving services than having to go get it on their own. And for us, medication compliance is a real important piece of what we do. This gives us information about who's picking up their medications, which shows some continuity of care. So overall, there's a lot of administrative efficiencies. There's a lot of patient-related stuff. I think the one piece that I do want to speak to just a teeny bit more is that whole piece around safety. Again, a lot of our entrances aren't safe. They're not designed that way because that's not what we could access when we needed to lease the space. We have had nightmares finding space. Andrew spoke to that issue, but when we got notification the December before last that we had to vacate our children's location and got a 30-day notice, that was going to be impossible. There were more than 100 staff in that building. You just can't walk out the door and find another location. Well, we spent significant time touring facilities, and we found a facility that would have been walk-in ready. Well, it was a planned medical center area, planned medical environment, and 3 out of the 5 owners of the building didn't want us in that area because of the population we serve. And yet we are part of healthcare and they use us every day. So then we went back to the drawing board and revisited locations and toured new locations, found another location we were going to lease. And then all of a sudden they only wanted to sell. And then when we started looking at expenses and what it would take to get in there and the cost to renovate that building to meet our needs was just excessive, and it wasn't going to happen in a timely way. Project Services was able to get us an extension, thank goodness, and we happened to walk into the location we're at right now, and we leased it. And we leased it because it didn't require a lot of renovation and cost to move there. But like I said, 30 days after we moved in, the owners told us they were trying to sell the building and that they couldn't afford to do any maintenance for us going forward. Not good when the boilers go out in the building. The elevators work, but the boilers didn't work. So that was just one experience. We've had floods that moved us out of our space for 6 to 8 months, and staff worked on tables. Not a very inviting opportunity for patients to sit in a table in somebody's office when you're receiving a service. So those are just a few of the examples of opportunities. We do think it would be beneficial for us, and this is something we have talked about I've been here 25 years, and I know conversations about a ComCare complex have started at least 20 years ago. And so it's great to have the opportunity to talk with you today. I don't know where it will go, but I do know that what we're doing now isn't working, and we have to come up with some solutions.
John, thank you. Appreciate it. Andrew, same. All right, let's brainstorm this opportunity a little bit and start with a few questions from the commission. Fire away.
I guess start off with the square footage questions. Where did we come up with 350 a square foot?
That is correct. The CIP is based on $350 per square foot.
Is that new build or?
It is based on new build. Although we're going to look at existing buildings as well. It's very difficult to try to build a budget around an existing building, not knowing what's going to be on the market next year, and what the costs are going to be. So for the purposes of the budget for the CIP, we just base it on new construction, and we estimate for inflation and buying land. And that's basically what the CIP is built on, but we're going to look at both.
And I think I've seen another number in there, 2.5 or 2.6 to, and it said to buy land or an existing building, maybe something to remodel or something. Just trying to understand the thoughts there.
That is correct. So the way this has been structured, because we have our first lease, potentially our first lease expiring in 2028, we have a sense of urgency to try to start figuring out what we're going to do to make this align with all 4 leases. And so what we've done is we've basically allowed $2.1 million in 2026 to start the search for an existing building or land. Depending on what we find, we're going to come back. If we are looking for an existing building, I don't know that $2 million is going to get us there. So we might have to do an amendment to increase that dollar amount to buy an existing building. But then based on the new build, we'll buy land in 2026. In 2027, we'd hire an architect and engineering firm to look at designing it and spend that year designing. And then in 2028, we'd put it out for construction, with hopefully having a building completed by the end of 2029. And that's also anticipating that we'd be able to renew our lease at 2028 that would expire for an additional year.
I am supportive of the 2 initiatives, 1, bringing in the leases, and 2, bringing it all into one campus. So just ready to spitball any ideas from there. Thank you.
Can I expand a little bit on that
Please.
350 a square foot? So we have not, actually on this one, we have not engaged an architect on any costs. This is all driven just by staff. However, on the square foot cost, we used what we did for the admin building, and that was based on information that we got from our architect. Very similar type of a building. So we used just the same square foot cost that we did for the admin building. That did come from our architect. So that was $350 a square foot. So we used that same cost for this one.
But these numbers are not firm, right? I mean, these are, I just want the public to understand. We don't know if this is a remodel, a new build. I mean, these are not firm numbers. Yeah. Okay.
And if I can piggyback on that, so this is all designed to work through our CIP process that we have built and the way we do our bonding. So, but for the administration building where we did kind of pre-bond half of what we expected at the time that cost to be, typically we go through a process to adopt a budget that has kind of a maximum amount of dollars that we think will be necessary, including a project contingency. And so what you see here is kind of the most we would expect to spend on a project. And that's what I ask folks to do when they're putting it in, so that when we are advertising this to our credit rating agencies and everything, we always have to talk about what future debt we anticipate. And so that is something that we have to make sure we say what that amount will be. So that's part 1 I want to tell you. Part 2 is, remember, every time we issue bonds, it's a 4-part process, right? There is adoption of a CIP. Then we have to go out for the bid for either the architecture or the construction, depending on if you want to buy a building or if you want to go out, buy land, and then construct new. So then we have to go through and do a project authorization for you to actually authorize work to begin and say that, yes, we're going to bond fund. And then we actually go through and do the bond sale for the actual dollars spent. So this is a very long process. This is this very, very beginning. You will have many other decision points through a process. So just understand that this is just allowing staff to get the ball rolling on a project like this, particularly when it's bond funded.
So to summarize, you're just always looking for the ceiling and the max.
Exactly.
When you're going to go out for bonding, and then you can come back from there.
You said it much better than I did. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Go ahead.
Andrew, so where are we just, I'm trying to summarize the whole thing. We looking at consolidating all 7 of these departments?
It would be 4 5. It would be 4 leases. The 5th component would be the administration offices, which are currently located in the Ronald Reagan building. And that would potentially free up some space in the Reagan building.
Okay, so the 4 lease sites plus administration that's in the Reagan building. So the other 2,
Part of the crisis complex.
well, the crisis is on its own. What's the last one?
The scope lease will move into the ComCare Crisis location. So we'll have one location, which is ComCare Crisis, as well as additional programs under the ComCare umbrella. And then the second location will be we'll dissolve these 4 leases as well as move admin out of Reagan.
Okay, and so your estimate is that I don't know currently, but currently that those 5 sites is at the 80,000 square feet.
Correct. That is correct.
So you're not anticipating needing more than 80,000, or you're just spitballing 80?
We sit down with an architect and walk through each program with Joan and her team to develop what the square footage need is for each program. And then we've basically summarized or subtotaled every single program and allowed for a circulation factor to get us to that 80,000 square feet number.
Okay. And so since the your first bullet is the 2.1 million in guessing on a land or building. So if we okay this in the CIP world, then you could start immediately on call services or start looking for.
I can start in January when we
Right.
when we
So you can
receive the
start in
fund.
January, and if you found something, even though we have stair-stepped all these leases, you could execute on that purchase and start evolving in.
Correct. We can't do anything until we have the funding approved.
Right. But okay, that's what I was saying. So, but if approved, then you can start sooner than later. You don't have to wait until 2028 to start all this.
No, we'd start in 2026.
Right away. Okay.
Sure. How?
Thank you, Chairman. This is the first time I remember that we've talked about this in a public open meeting. I mean, the idea may have been talked about for years in your space, but in terms of commissioners, if you will, hearing this idea, this is kind of our first. Okay. Can't remember the details. I have to look that up, I guess. Anyway, yeah, there you go. Okay. You said a number of things that had me alarmed a little bit. You made a comment that had significant environmental issues. Then you went on to say there was no heat for an entire winter and no AC for an entire summer. It doesn't sound right to me. Please, Andrew, you're in charge of facilities. Please validate that comment one more.
So I don't know that we have gone an entire season without climate control in any of these leases. I do know one of the previous lease locations, the HVAC system could not simultaneously heat and cool. So every spring, every fall, you'd have a situation where the nights are getting cool and the days are getting hot. And so you're basically subjected to the landlord on when they're going to make the determination to switch over to heat or switch over to AC. And so you have a situation in the mornings where the building's going to be cold. If your AC is on so that you can cool it in the afternoon when it's hot, or if it's the fall, or the other situation is if you turn on the AC, then you don't have a way to, or you turn on the heat. I'm sorry. You turn on the heat, then you don't have a way to cool in the afternoon. So the building can get hot.
I assume by that comment and the landlord's paying the utility costs.
That is correct. I believe that was the case on that particular
Sounds like we should
location.
just renegotiate that whole point.
It's not based on the utility costs. It's based on the fact that the existing infrastructure doesn't have the capability of doing a simultaneously heat and cool. So you're basically switching it off and on, and it's a multiple day process in order to
Well,
do
in
that.
2025, I would think that's something we could solve. I don't think that's something that's insolvable.
That absolutely 100%. The problem with that is it's not our building. And so we don't want to invest our taxpayer money into somebody else's building.
Quick question. So the $1,081,423 per year in current lease costs, where does that money come from?
There is a number of it that is grant funded, but there is a portion that is general fund as well.
That would be the scope portion, I believe. So
Scope.
the offender assessment program.
And that's the what's moving to crisis, correct?
Yes.
What about
So the
those
lease,
services on
she
that?
said a minute ago.
Is that general fund?
So the part that's moving, the part that's general fund is going to crisis anyway, but so the remaining buildings that you're discussing today, they're all grant funded lease spaces.
But I believe if we move forward with this, that grant funding could go back to paying the bonds on this project.
So I want to be careful. It's not necessarily grants per se, it's their revenue funding, right? It's the money that they get from being able to bill for their services. So it has some flexibility to it. So the goal would be eventually to, instead of paying those leases from the revenue fund at roughly 1.1 million, we would instead shift to using that same revenue fund to pay for the bond and interest costs on this facility, which we estimate to be about 2.9 million on average over a 20-year cycle. So that would not fall to taxpayers. That would fall to the ComCare revenue fund to pay that. In the conversations we've had with Joan, we believe that that's a perfectly acceptable use of those funds.
It's at 2.9 million per year for 20 years,
Correct.
roughly on average.
Once you include the interest cost.
And if we were to own this building, we would have to continue, I guess, once it's paid off, we'd have to own and maintain this building. That's a property tax funded thing, or is that going to be?
I suppose eventually it could be, if it would be a county asset. But the goal would be to continue to use that revenue fund as long as the CCBHC model stays in place. It would be our intention to use those funds because these services are provided to the same clients who generate that revenue.
How much square footage does the admin utilize at Reagan?
I don't know that I have the existing footprint for Reagan, but I do know that this out of that 80,000 square feet, we've allowed 10,000 square feet, 10,085 square feet for admin.
Is there some synergy that happens when you relocate admin to the same place we're doing client services?
Oh,
Is that some kind of synergy that we would want? Admin people don't necessarily provide therapy. So
no, we don't. But you got to think of admin services. We also have our billing staff there. We have our quality improvement staff there. We have our medical records there. So it's stuff that does touch the patient experience with ComCare. It houses a few of us in administrative positions, which makes us more accessible to our workforce and more in touch with what's going on a day-to-day basis.
before they were in the Reagan building, where was it located before that?
Oh my gosh, admin was located, if you remember, at the old crisis center at 934 Water Street.
And then, so since I've been here, we children's services was at the Equity Bank building on one of the upper floors.
Uh-huh.
That's basically, when I went in there and visited that, it was just basically office space,
Yeah.
spaces like office environment that you would expect. And then they moved from that down here on Broadway.
Right.
And then now that's moved. And now they moved over to someplace, I can't tell on the map where it is exactly.
It's in Brittany Center at 21st and Woodlawn.
Okay.
I think
And
that's the name of the area.
that's fairly new, right? We just did that recently.
Yes, August of, was that August last year? Boy, time goes fast.
And since I've been here, we moved the admin, we actually doubled, I'd say, the space and the capacity of ComCare Crisis on North Main. That also happened since I've been here. Right? So I guess we'll keep on moving this stuff around. And I know we also had stuff at Harry Street Mall, and at least I think we did. Maybe I'm wrong. It was there.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess to move these four things together, and you said five, counting admin, but I might disagree with you on that part because again, it creates an empty space in the building. I'm not sure we need the empty space there. What's the plan for the ComCare Crisis on North Main once we move Crisis over to this building?
I don't know. We haven't had significant conversation with the county on that. So I don't know. I don't know if the county had plans for that or if we have plans for that. I know we could certainly create an opportunity for wellness for our population, maybe even some offsite substance abuse groups for people at the MAC. I mean, there's lots of opportunity with that building. I just haven't, I've had brief conversations with Tim, and it's just uncertain at this point.
I just think there's a lot of square footage in that area between North Main, the crisis we're in right now, Park Valley, Munger, and even the DA Annex area. I think so. It seems like there's a lot of spaces that are in flex right now. We're not sure exactly where we're going to end up with any of those spaces. I don't think.
It's probably,
and I-
yeah.
go
I
ahead.
can jump in on that building, Commissioner. We would evaluate if there's a need for that building for county purposes, and if not, we would probably look to eliminate that building.
How many square feet is that?
About 15 or 16,000 square feet.
I feel like we don't have I know they're trying to present a plan here, but I don't feel like this is a plan that I feel like has enough detail right now to get behind it. I mean, I recognize there's some benefit to being co-located, at least some of these offices. I don't know that normally I would say I like to own buildings rather than lease them, but when majority of the money for the leases comes from grant, I might disagree with that one instance. So I think the
It's
long-term,
revenue fund.
pardon me?
It's revenue fund, not grant.
Right. But my point is, what assurance do we have that the revenue will be consistent forever? I don't know how much we can be assured that we know for sure that the revenues will be the same as they are today, or they'll keep up with our demand.
Yeah, we don't know that. I mean, it will rebase in 3 years. It could go up, it could go down. But if it goes down, it's because we're delivering more services, which means we're billing more. So there's some offset there. We're not hearing from the feds that they're looking to cut any of the CCBHC funding. It's in legislature at the federal level, and it hasn't been touched, and we don't know what will happen long term. But I do know that this lease stuff is really a big significant challenge for us.
If I may add, that situation could happen now, and we're contractually bound
Right.
by all these leases, and we have to pay.
Right. Was there some desire at some point to keep the children's service lease separate from any other thing we do here?
Not if we can have separate entrances and access for that service. It would be nice to consolidate them as well. It would just have to be some separation.
So what we really need is the 80,000 square feet is what we're looking for. Is there a geographic aspect to this in terms of where it needs to be in the county?
Not at this point.
So if there's an 80,000 square foot office-like building somewhere in the county, that would be something we could take a look at. These are primarily offices, primarily.
And group rooms and such like
So
that.
again, if it was a conference room or a lobby space, whatever, there's all kinds of ways that utilize spaces in office buildings. I just want to make sure that we could look for office space if we wanted to. That would be, again, I was just say that this is a pretty big price tag once again. And I'm not, again, I love the presentation, but I'm not sure as we wrap up the conversation today, that this is me putting my seal of approval. We're going to move forward with this exact plan. To me, that's not what this is today. Thank you.
I would just kind of sum it up, maybe a question, and then when you talk about liability to the taxpayer, I feel like we have more liability with all these leases if there was a revenue model change. Andrew, you hinted on it a little bit. I've been in circumstances before where the revenue changed and I was stuck into leases, and my rent payable was a fixed number, despite the revenue changing. If we own the asset, we can sell the building.
Absolutely.
We have adjustments.
That's correct.
So I see that. I am nervous about a $35 million price tag. But so I would want to get into some cost analysis of what the savings could be and the efficiencies could be. And I think that we're not there yet. I understand that. Totally understand that. But that's something that I would want to see. The other thing is I ask frequently about the debt limits and where we're at. I know $35 million is just a number. That's just kind of we're throwing a dart to try to get a process started. But I want to make sure that we are well within debt reason, and we have a lot of projects we're talking about.
I would say, so going back to the funding portion of this, when we're going out into these leases, we basically lose control, a certain element of control, and whether that's maintenance, whether that's contractually bound to pay out, we don't have the flexibility to move and pivot as we may need to in the future or as we do tomorrow, today.
I'm fully in agreement. I think Commissioner Blueball hinted at it. I'm in agreement with the strategic direction of consolidation of geography and services into campuses. I think that's the right move. I just want to make sure that it makes sense dollars wise for the overall strategic vision of what we're trying to do financially. So, but I see the vision. I just want to make sure dollars wise that we're not overextending.
So to answer your question, we are not overextending. As you know, and we talked about during the CIP presentation about a month-ish ago, we have quite a bit of debt falling off over the next few years, in particular in 2028, when we have both the Spirit debt, which is about $1 million per year just in principal, plus our NCAT debt, which is $3.2 million per year. So you've got $4 million per year. And again, we know that we have significant needs. Nothing that has been presented today is something that I would tell you is a want. There are a lot of wants on the watch list, $40 million worth. But these are things that we need. And so what we have tried to present to the commission is a strategic way to bring debt on as debt falls off in a way that makes sense, trying to meet all of our needs on a timely basis, but also balancing the amount of debt that we have so that there is not any kind of tax increase that's necessary. In fact, if you recall, what we presented during budget hearings is that the actual amount of debt that we project having to pay off over the next few years is actually decreasing, which means that you'll have a decreasement levy rate for your bond and interest fund just based on what has been thrown out. So, excuse me, if you can see here, we have a number of metrics that we have to adhere to now as a part of your debt policy. If you'll recall, last April 2024, the commission updated a brand new debt policy. All of the metrics that were put into that are based on maintaining our S&P AAA credit rating. We are able to look at their scorecard. Our municipal advisor was able to recreate that for us. And so with all of these measures, we're able to do that. So in addition to these measures that you'll see here, we also have every single debt issuance that we are planning to do in every single year mapped out in our debt file. And we are able to come over and actually look at what our debt load looks like for each year. And we're able to demonstrate that to you in the budget book. And what you can see is that our existing debt is exceptionally manageable. We're at just less than 15% of what the state debt limit allows, and we will actually get smaller over the years, even with these debt issuances. So we anticipate never spending more than about 17 million per year on bond and interest, and that's lower than where we have historically been. So I don't know if I'm hitting the question.
Yeah, it is.
Completely.
I think we're real early in this discussion. I think when any of us hear 35 million, knowing that there's other projects out there, I think everybody gets a little tense. So Tim and Joan, maybe Lindsay, could you help us understand I got two questions. One, help us quantify the savings. We don't have to do this today. So if you can follow back up, help us quantify. I believe that consolidation into campuses is a good strategic play. I really do. And everything that Joan hit on, I think, are added benefits and opportunities here. I just want to quantify so we can tell the story to the taxpayer. This is why it makes sense, dollars wise. The second thing is, what do you need to move the conversation forward? Is this putting this officially on a watch list? Is this what do you need to move the conversation? I have a couple buildings in mind where I think could be useful for this type of campus setting. So what do you need?
So to answer that question, what this will be is a project that's included in your 2026-2030 CIP. So when it comes time for approving that, you'll see it spread out over 3 years. Similarly to what you saw in your budget hearing, you'll see the cost staggered out over 3 years. So in order for this team to be able to start work in 2026, just like Regional Forensic Science Center, we need you to authorize this project. Then we would come to you in roughly February of next year with a project authorization, where could tell us that it's okay to start doing the work. And then that would allow our team to go out and engage with either the on-call broker or the on-call architect, depending on which path the commission is interested in going, and go from there. And I see that Tom wants to talk.
I just want to make sure, does that then show as a priority one in 2026? It goes from a watch list to a priority one? Is that what it?
Right. That's where it is currently. Regional Forensic, both conversations today are for projects that are in that category 1. So that does not mean that the building will open in 2026. It means that it will be our intention to start allowing staff to work on.
And it also doesn't mean it's going to be a $35 million project?
Correct.
Okay.
No, this is the ceiling. As Commissioner Bluebow pointed out, this is the ceiling. There's still many, many steps that you all have to authorize before
Redundant
they're
for the
dollar.
public on purpose.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So and let me understand, I think the two things that staff owes the people are quality and quantity. There is a fiscal side of this, and that fiscal side has to make sense to the commission and to the taxpayer. There's also a quality side, which Joan has spent a lot of time today talking about, on the efficiency and what it means for clients and people. And that's also important. So we will come back with more on both of those topics.
I think the angst sometimes is if this is property tax funded and what could be used out of the gate from the revenue fund, which is designed to be put back into the community, not to set in a piggy bank. We got to put these dollars back to the community, and what would be ongoing operations that are property tax funded versus revenue funded. That's kind of the idea. I'm convinced that the CCBHC increased rate needs to be put back to the community. I get it. And if this is the best use of those dollars, then I want to be supportive. I just want to make sure that we're there.
Correct. So the Medicaid revenue is supposed to be put back into Medicaid services, and we haven't done a lot of that, putting it back yet. So we need to look at doing.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of that. Okay. I think this has been helpful. What's your timing on a decision on this, Lindsay, on what you need in regards to?
June 17th is our county manager's drop dead day for recommendations that go in the budget. I'm looking at Lorian back there to confirm. Yes. So what we would need to know is if there is a consensus from the commission to not include this, because right now it is a part of the tentative recommended CIP that we all had presented to you. And that is part of what I think generated this conversation.
Okay. Well, if you have some angst on continuing this, I'd encourage us to reach out to Lindsay, and then we can schedule some times together to have this conversation. Okay. Good, Tom. Joan, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, team. Okay.
We'll shift gears now, and Alora's going to come back to the podium, and then Chief Lantern will be after her. But what was asked is that Alora kind of just go through her decision package listing again. And I think, Chairman, you wanted to explore the phase type approach. So I think that's where we'll go from here.
Hey, good morning, Laura.
Good morning.
Happy Monday.
Yes, same to you. I've got some handouts, but I apologize. I didn't know how many people would be here, so I have to make it before. I'm gonna start here, go around the commissioners to Rusty, and that's all I made it for. Not that everybody else isn't equally as important. And then I will tell you, I didn't get with communications to zhuzh it up. It is just raw and ready to rumble with. So if you can recall from our budget presentation, we talked about the number of positions, and Nicole, I don't know if you wanted to bring up that slide. I know you and Rusty had discussed that. But we had talked about adding on 20 FTEs to our FTE count. And the goal with that is to separate out that call taking and dispatching completely. If we go back to that Jensen Hughes report and we talk about that dichotic listening, how we have 2 headsets on, I've got a radio channel in one ear. So I've got officers, medics, firefighters talking, and then I have phone calls in the other. I can tell you firsthand, I've had moms with babies that need CPR in one ear, and I've had an officer kick off a traffic pursuit in the other, all at the same time, which is not an ideal situation. So there's times that it works. There's times that it really does not work. And it's an antiquated model that really we outgrew quite a long time ago. So for about 10 years, we've been talking about getting rid of this situation. This is why we expanded the comm center. This is why we remodeled in 2023, was to have the desk positions to do this. And so the Jensen Hughes report really highlighted the need for that. Their recommendation was one that had to do with headsets, where you had part of the radio traffic coming out of an external speaker and part coming from the headset. But that truly does not eliminate dichotic listening, because you're still listening to two things at once. They're just from two different, one's coming from an external speaker versus a headset. Anyway, again, the ideal model is to have completely separated call taking and dispatching. Our view is that if you call 911, you deserve the undivided attention of the person that's taking your call. If you are a field personnel, a firefighter, a medic, an officer, you deserve the undivided attention of the person that's handling that radio traffic. So currently we have 91 call taker and dispatch positions. We have 117 FTEs total, but of just call takers and dispatchers, we have 91. We look at our needs as 78 dispatchers and 61 call takers to completely separate out those tasks.
Can you say that number one more time? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And it's at the top of that page that I've given you there. 78 dispatchers, 61 call takers, 139 positions. I tried to make it easy.
Well, I don't have my glasses.
That's okay. It happens. So that leaves us 48 short from what our desired goal is. One of the other things I will talk about in here is that when we look at the dispatch positions, again, when we look at that Jensen Hughes report and the desire of our fire personnel, they want somebody to dedicate themselves to monitoring the TAC channels for large fire events. Right now, we do not have the staffing to do that. We talked to them about what that looks like, and they are putting together some models about what that person would do. But long story short, we need to build in an extra person on staff ready to monitor those TAC channels for those large events if we want to have that model. So there is some extra staffing in there. And then we also, we want to be able to do more training. That's one of the things that we really have pushed on. We have this employee development team, but we have to be able to take staff off the floor to train them. And we're not in a position where we rolled a voicemail, or we can't just get up from our desks and walk away to do that stuff. So again, we have to have some cushion in there for that. Anyway, that leaves us 48 short, back to that. And so what we are asking for is 20 positions for next year. 48 for me seems like a lot. So I'd like to slow roll this out and see if we can't find other ways to build in some efficiencies to where 48, we can get our desired results with less than 48. This graph that you'll see here is just for call handling. Right now, we are most of the time meeting our 90% of calls answered within 15 seconds. Not 100% of the time, but I will say the majority of the time. But that's with dispatchers also answering calls. Again, if we want to meet that model without dispatchers answering calls, we need to add on to those numbers. And this is accounting for days off, for sick leave, trying to have, there's some cushion in there for sick leave, vacation leave, things like that. If you look at the back, just for anybody not familiar with it, the Erlang calculator is something within our industry that's used to provide those staffing estimates, looks at call volume, handling time, service level targets, things like that. Just an explanation so you know where my numbers are coming from. But that is where we are getting at. So when we talk about a phased approach, we are already looking at a phased approach. This is also based on a strict 3-shift model. We actually do 5 shifts of call takers. So we have some swing shifts because you'll see like at midnight, our call volume is very different than at 4 a.m., but that's all 3rd shift. If you look at a 3-shift model, so we try to do some power shifts in there. That's again, where I think we can not, where maybe we don't need 48, but I think 20 is a solid number to get us started. And again, build some efficiencies from there.
Okay. Why don't we go? Is this the only decision package you're going to go over today, or is this?
I can go over
Okay.
whatever you'd like. I just know that this was the one that had the most questions. Yes.
Here's where I think might be helpful for the commission. Why don't we just pause here and talk about this? And then if we want to talk about the accreditation discussion and that manager position, we can do that separately. So let me just set the tone of where my head's at, because I'm the one who's been asking you, and I thank you for your patience. And
Yeah, absolutely.
you have been asking for several years about modernizing your department, and I believe you have commissioners that are wanting to empower you to do the things that you've been asking to do.
Right.
The question is, as I look at just the public safety decision packages, there's other things on here in the other departments that I know are big needs too. So I am going to be supportive of your decision packages because you want to modernize. We are pushing you to modernize. This is a big modernization effort. The community needs it. I'm proud of what you're doing there. The question is just timing. What can be spread out over maybe a couple of years instead of 1 year? That way I can look down at other organizations and say, hey, we can strategically target here.
Mhm.
You just gave an answer on the 48 versus 20. So the 20, in your view, is a scaled approach
Mhm.
that is the minimum needed to do what you need to do to separate call takers and dispatchers?
I don't know that it's a minimum needed to do what we need to do. I think it is a paced approach that gets us closer to that goal and allows us to assess it along with other efficiencies to know that we are asking for what we need responsibly, that we're not over asking.
Okay.
Yes.
Other questions?
Thanks, Laura, for explaining. So was it Jensen Hughes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I remember right, you hit on it, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But one of the key things that you feel and they pointed out is this separation of the
Mm-hmm.
dual.
The dichotic listing is what they call it. Yes. Yes.
Was there anything else that was more important than that stuck out to us on that report, or was that trying to just prioritize the?
Well, on the 911 side, they more important than that. They didn't really grade them out as less important, more important. I know that the dispatcher available to monitor the TAC channel was on that list. So they had like recommendations and then like suggestion, and so I would say that in the TAC channel dispatcher were kind of in those higher valued recommendations. But no, I think those were kind of the ones that were really key to it.
An eventual certification of
The accreditation. I'm looking at Rusty. I think they also emphasized the specialization of channels to people. This is an evolution in this industry right now. I had noted some marks while Alora was talking. The concept of 911 dispatching in 40 years has gotten radically different. So they've always been asked to be fast and get resources out there timely and accurately. What they're being asked for now is all this triaging and specialization of channel. In other words, she no longer has the ability to set a dispatcher on PD one night, fire the next, EMS the next. That's going away. These entities want specialization. And I think that's what Jensen Hughes hit on too, is their specialties because fire and EMS and police are getting more complicated too. So this is changing Alora's landscape too. So I think that was one of the other emphases. Do you remember that, Rusty, at all?
Yeah, if you take the report as a whole, and if you look across the country, community expectations, citizen expectations, generally, a lot of citizens don't necessarily want to know the details of 911. They want to know when they call, somebody's going to answer immediately. Somebody's going to understand what they need. Somebody's going to get them the resource they need, and it's going to be quickly and timely. You see across the country where we're a litigious nation, and you see across the country when 911 seemingly fails, people run to the lawyer and they file lawsuits against either the city or the county, whoever's running that 911 center, trying to point out that somehow that the government is responsible for their issue. And it's not the litigation that we worry about. It's the quality of service and it's the health and well-being of our employees. They talked about the dichotic listening, and I'll let Laura expound upon that, but that goes back to staffing and that goes back to specialization to some degree, getting the phone out of the dispatcher's ear and having a dispatcher who is concentrated on and well trained and experienced in whatever discipline it is. Fire is very unique and specialized because their needs are significantly different than law enforcement. And EMS is kind of in a weird space between law enforcement and fire. If they're fire integrated EMS, then there's some overlap in what they do. But in a third service like we have, EMS and fire are lumped together in the dispatch, but they've got to have a level of specialty as well in the way they deploy and all of that stuff, which some of that's done in the field, but the dispatchers have to understand it. So when they talk about the dichotic listening, it's getting those call takers in place so that dispatchers are not trying to listen to a phone call and radio traffic, maybe taking a phone call that's law enforcement related and trying to dispatch an EMS or vice versa, where they're crossing disciplines and they're trying to do 2 or 3 things at once. It's not good for the call takers, or it's not good for the person answering the call and trying to listen to the radio. It's not good for the people in the field who are maybe not being heard because the phone is taking precedence.
Okay.
So it's, I don't know if you want to expand upon any of that. It's a lot of stuff and it all intertwines with each other. And what she's trying to get to is specialized call taker dispatcher and then specialized discipline and get the dual headsets out of those dispatchers' realms.
Okay.
I don't know that I need to expound, but I'm
Okay.
happy to.
So, all that we've done collectively, you, construction,
Mhm.
compensation, the inquiries from media or concerned citizens have drastically, they've disappeared from my perspective.
Mhm.
So I compliment everybody on that. So now we're in this phase. If this is my question, and then I'll hand off to others. So, could you accomplish your goal if you had kind of a little bit of follow up from Commissioner Beatty? But I'll just ask: could you do this if you had like 10 additional this year and 10 next year's budget?
No,
Or okay,
we'll get closer, but no.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I completely understand, the world's changed from police, fire, EMS to now it's ICT1, you need a mental health provider. Everything is changing and the model really hasn't changed. And I appreciate the feedback from Jensen Hughes and you trying to incorporate it. Do you know of any other communities in the Midwest that have kind of taken this next generation of dispatching and how, what they're incorporating, and are there benchmark opportunities that we could look at over there?
So we are really unique in our setup here. So we are what we call a consolidated agency. So that means that we do everything under one roof, right? So we take the calls, we dispatch fire, we dispatch police, we dispatch EMS. Most agencies our side, our communities our side, have that disparate where you call 911, they say, do you need police, fire, EMS? You answer that and they either take the call or they shuffle you off. So in Johnson County, for example, if you call 911 and you say you need the fire department, they're going to transfer you over to another number. Or if you're in Johnson County and you're on I-35 and you need the police department, but you're going into Leawood or another, as you're traveling through jurisdictions, they're going to transfer you off to another police department. And there's delays caused by those transfers that they're identifying. Because we are consolidated, I think there's a lot of savings that go into that. There's not redundancy in paying for disparate systems, but it creates some challenges. And we had this model where everybody did everything. Again, you were a dispatcher for all disciplines, and it was kind of this watered down way of doing things. So what we are trying to do, again, is create this specialization that happens through different comm centers and other areas, all under one roof, which I think is absolutely achievable and able to be done well. But there's not a lot of modeling out there, folks that do it. Now, Tulsa, for example, excuse me, does fire and EMS, fire and law enforcement under one roof, and they do it specialized. So you are either a fire dispatcher or you're a law enforcement dispatcher, and they have that dedicated, disciplined, dispatch model there. Their EMS is a separate entity that is dispatched while in the same building. It's a whole separate agency in there. So there are some that are similar in the separation, but not quite as, I guess not all the disciplines.
Sounds like our current model's pretty thin already.
Thin in what way?
Go in a lot of different directions. And it sounds like you're already eliminating waste. You're reducing the duplicates and
Yeah, so yes, well, and I say our current model, the model that we had prior to moving into discipline specific dispatching, I would say is not the model that I would recommend to anybody. As we've moved into discipline specific dispatching, I think our model is more in alignment with what we are seeing throughout the country in the specialized dispatching.
I guess my thin
No.
comment is you're already extending manpower quite a bit. So.
Yes, sorry, yes, I apologize for misunderstanding that. Yes.
Laura, can you help me and just kind of break down what each of these columns mean?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, thank you. So when we look at this, again, we look at hour of the day. Total, this is over the course of a year of how many calls we take during that hour over a year, then dividing it out by 365 days. So we're looking at average calls per hour in the year. 209 seconds is our average call handling time. And so when we get into that airline calculator, we look at how many calls in that hour, what our average call handling time is, our desired answering point, which is again, answering calls within 15 seconds, 90% of the time, which is our industry standard, which again, we really want to do 100% of the time. Nobody wants to be that 10% that takes more than 15 seconds. But anyway, that's still what we go to. And so the airline calculator then provides a recommendation of how many is required. So that's what that airline recommendation is. They do not.
How many people?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. They do not take into account the days off. Obviously, we don't work them 7 days a week, or we try not to. And so then that gets into the total required is when you extrapolate that out to how many people takes to cover 7 days a week, with everybody getting 2 days off. And so then you'll see, like for third shift, for example, at that 2,300 hour, that 16.1 is the recommendation. And with days off, well, that you kind of round it down to 16. So that carries out through a shift. And that's where I talk about being able to leverage some power shifts, because while you need 16 people at 11 o'clock at night, you don't need 16 people at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so that's where some efficiencies get built in. But those are those columns and what they mean. Yes.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Howe?
Just to drill in a little bit further. So like for that first line, it says 10 under the airline recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
That's 10 people required to handle the 63 calls
Mm-hmm.
at 209 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so we need 10 people, and because of sick leave and vacation, we have up to 14 people that could fill those positions.
The airline recommendation does take into account shrinkage for unscheduled leave. So that's,
The 10 includes that.
yes.
Okay.
What it does not take into account is scheduled days off. So the 2 scheduled days off.
So you need 14 people
Yes.
to be able to provide 10 people.
Not 14 on at a time though, but 14 assigned to that shift.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what's the 16 again?
So again, if I look at dividing it out, so third shift starts at 2,300 hours and goes to 0,700. And so at 2,300 hours, the total required is 16.1. So just rounding that down to 16 people. So if you had 16 people assigned to that shift, and again, it goes down, then it circles back around to 7 a.m. And so that's just for that entirety of that shift. And again, that's where I'm saying that while it says that we are short 48, by the time you build in power shifts and other shift opportunities and efficiencies, I don't know that we need 48.
So the line that says 0800 to 0900, that's 16.1. That's driving the number 16 that's in the blue section above. Trying to figure out where you said 60. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
So at the very bottom where it says
I see.
yes.
So
Yes.
that bottom number, 2,300 to midnight,
Mm-hmm.
that number drives the 16 through the entire shift. So most of the shift, we have enough people to handle. Is this number total final? Is that ideal, or is this current, or what is that?
No, that is ideal. It is not current.
Do we know what the current numbers are?
So currently, like I said, we have 5 shifts. So we have the first, second, and third, and then we have a swing shift of AM and PM. And so currently on PM, I believe we have 8 people assigned to PM and two assigned to three assigned to third shift. And so there's 11 that go until 3 a.m. But again, that's not counting days off within those 11.
Okay, so you add up those numbers in the right column. I see my math wrong. That's 61 total. Ideal. Okay, that's what it says at the top. 61 is request. Okay. So right now, do all of the folks that work this, they all do the two audio feeds?
All of my dispatchers do. So all of my dispatchers are also call takers. Not all of my call takers are dispatchers.
Okay. If something is, I don't know if you guys do this or not, but let's say you triage the call. Something is kind of a high acuity. There's a baby about to be born, or something just had a car accident, or maybe life and death situation, and that may be different than someone who sees a getting up a tree type of deal. Okay, so are they able to say this is a high acuity call, a high priority call? I need to focus on this. Like I can't do the other thing I might do normally, but I'm going to stay focused on this call. I mean, so in terms of triage priority, when I have a call that's really stressful because things are really happening quickly and they need my full attention. Am I able to simply say, I'm not going to, try to do two things at once. I need my full attention on this. Can they do that today?
They can, yes. Of course, it depends on who's available to take that radio channel. So for example, if I'm giving active CPR instructions, typically somebody will take, as a dispatcher, somebody will pick up my radio channel, and it may be several dispatchers who already have radio channels that are going to, between, several of them pick up my radio channel. It's not ideal because now we're juggling more than one radio channel at a time. Of course, the supervisor, if they're in the room and available, they're going to pick up that radio channel. So yes, it is available, but it's not guaranteed that somebody's going to be available depending on where we are in breaks and lunches and where we have people in the room.
Nothing's ever guaranteed in this department because
No.
you have a plane crash and you get 200 phone calls. And
absolutely. Right. Yes. But yes, we absolutely try to create space in there for them to say that. Yes.
Doesn't sound good.
It's a 911 call right there. We're flooded. No, I'm
Yes.
just.
And so total separation may be ideal. Is that considered does any 911 emergency communications and any comparable to us do it that way specifically? I mean, is this?
Yes.
I would think that we are kind of normal in how we try to keep people as busy as possible and do as much help as they possibly can that they can handle. So I mean, that's the efficient model is if they can do a little bit more, you're asking them to do, what's their capacity as a person. And we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to overdo it in some way. We want to make sure that everyone is utilized, I guess, to their full potential. So the fact is there's probably an efficiency, ideal, what's the most one person can do, then do it accurately and do it really well. And I'm not sure that total separation is exactly, it may sound good, but it's also expensive. So I'm trying to find that happy medium between the two ideas.
So to be doing call taking and dispatching at the same time with our call volume in a community our size, it is not really done. When I tell people, when I go to industry conferences, things like that, and I tell people that our dispatchers are call takers, they find that to be very wild. They don't understand it. As a dispatcher, you're already multitasking on the radio. So you have, you think about, well, you're monitoring your radio. That's one task. Well, it's not one task. So I may have, as a law enforcement dispatcher, 15 calls working. Each call may have 2 to 3 officers on it. And those officers all have requests for me. And one of the things that we've also historically done is when law enforcement, EMS, fire agencies have asked us to help out with things that support their field operations, historically, we have said, no, we're at our capacity and we cannot do that. So we haven't really done a great job of supporting them and proactively addressing their needs in the field. And so, but even without that, you know, we're calling in stroke alerts, we're calling in STEMI alerts, things like that for the hospitals, for law enforcement. We are calling over to the jail, to the children's, you know, we're calling hospitals to try to find people. We've got, you know, we're trying to track down, this officer's got this case and he knows that this is related to another case. So we're searching through CAD to try to figure out what case goes with this case and pulling things together. For the fire department, we're calling utility providers to pull things where, and, you know, there's always tasks to be done outside of just, you know, we're sending them, they're getting on scene. You know, there's a lot to do within that.
Two more quick questions.
Mhm.
So if we were to support the 20 FTEs or, and maybe a future decision additional above that, what about workspaces in the office? Is there resources available? Or is that another cost we haven't talked about yet?
So physical workspaces, yes, we have enough to support the 20, absolutely. There is the decision package for the phones, the actual, so we have the desk, we need the phones for those. And so there's that, which comes out of the 911 funds that we have. But yes, we have the physical space, and that's what you guys have set the stage for in that remodel. And so we've been proactively thinking ahead for this.
So in terms of the advisory boards that deal with emergency communications, which of them have reviewed this whole ask and have they made any decisions, recommendations?
So the Public Safety Advisory Board that is comprised of our chiefs, you know, sheriff, things like that. We've been talking about this again for 10 years, and they are highly in support of it. They know that this is on the request or on the, for request for 2026 budget. They are in support of it. You know, they want this. They want their field personnel to have the dedicated attention of their dispatcher. Chief Landerman's coming up next. You can certainly ask him about it directly. On the Community Advisory Board, we have talked about it. You know, I think anecdotally, they've said that, yes, when they call 911, they don't want to be told to hold on. They agree with, you know, the Jensen Hughes report, of course, has been a hot topic. They want to support anything that supports any of those recommendations, but it's not been such a point of conversation as it has been with my public safety agency heads.
I guess I said two, but I guess I have one more. The request up there says 210,000. That's for the phone consoles. Okay. What's the budget? Oh, there it is, 1.6. Thank you. All right. That's all I need.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have everything I need, Laura. I appreciate it. Good job.
Any other questions?
No, I think if I do, I'll be able to just reach out to you directly or reach out to Rusty, Lindsay, and Tom. I think I have what I need.
Okay.
It was really helpful to have you back today to walk through
Yeah,
some of these
absolutely.
things. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief's been waiting patiently. Hello, sir.
How are you? I'm up,
Welcome.
Angela. Can I come up here with me too? I fortunately wasn't here during the budget meeting, so and we both are out of town this weekend, so I don't have any handouts for you. So just ask whatever questions you may have. I know we talked about the it's still hers here.
There it is.
Our decision packages, the first few are personnel driven as far as the EMT to paramedic expansion. That kind of goes hand in hand with our request for the six more EMTs that we're asking to fund in our budget. Right now, in our budget, there are 4 EMT positions that are actually in our budget. The rest are funded as paramedics. This would allow us to increase the number of EMTs to get through class. I graduated, I believe, 21 I believe. Through that program, it's been highly sought after. We've had some EMTs come here and employment with us specifically for that program. It gives us a chance to evaluate those EMTs as employees, and it's a competitive process now to go through and to get one of these EMT to paramedic slots. So that's been a really good program for us. And I'll kind of slow down. If you have questions or you have specific questions on any of these, go ahead and ask.
This is for the fees and tuition.
This is for, yes, the tuition, books, fees, everything.
That's not a one, so that would be ongoing, or is that one time?
That'd be ongoing per year. And that's dependent on how many we have. If we have the full 10 spots allocated, if we have 10 people going through that year, if for some reason we don't have enough EMTs that apply for it, we only have 5 or 6, that would be less, of course. So like I said, the second request is the full-time positions, the 6 more EMTs. We've been running right around 91% staffed here recently. We have some more 2 more paramedics and an advanced EMT that are starting with us. We've opened up, we have 4 applicants for full-time EMTs coming in now. We've kind of, listened and taken advice. Our goal was to have, or still is to have, as many paramedics as we can, because our delivery model in this county is a little bit different. So those having 2 paramedics on critical calls is essential, but to get a number, as many ambulances on the street as possible. We're hiring as many EMTs also as we can to try to beef up those numbers and keep ambulances on the streets. That does come a point where, we can't obviously have 50% EMTs and paramedics, because we still have to onboard, orientate new hires, new paramedics that have to be with other paramedics for a certain length of time to make sure that they're well oriented and ready to go on their own with an EMT. So it can't be 50-50. If paramedics call in sick, we have to replace them with another paramedic. But we have been hiring as many qualified EMTs as possible to try to keep as many trucks on the street as we can. So. And then the third package was the mobile integrated health position. And I know this is something we've talked about a lot. We've had discussions, and Angela can probably give more information on this. She's very familiar with the mobile integrated health, but there's the delivery method. I know Laura talked a lot about how things have changed in 911, things have changed in EMS. So our 50-year history here, it was just, we put ambulances out there and we ran calls, and it was just the same model for every patient. Didn't matter how sick or acute your injuries were, you were getting the same delivery. Believe that has to change at some point. We can't keep just throwing more advanced life support ambulances out there to patients that may not need those resources, because there are patients that are acutely sick or injured that need those. And if we kind of change our delivery method a little bit, we could free up some advanced life support trucks to be available for those acutely sick or injured patients. This is one model, one program to do that. There are departments throughout the country that have began community paramedic or mobile integrated health. Like I said, it doesn't decrease the call volume, because they're still going to call and we're still going to send a resource. We're just going to send hopefully a different resource, or the right resource for that patient. And I know what Laura talked about, specific dispatching. I believe in the next few years for EMS, it's going to get even more specific on what we're going to require dispatch to do on the front end to make sure that the correct resources are being sent for those patients. So She talked about, fire and law enforcement has specific dispatch requests. It's going to get even more complicated for EMS as we ask them to send the right resource to the right patient. And that's good for the patients. It's good for the community. It's good for, the hospital systems that are already taxed that, we're not just sending a transport truck and just loading these patients and taking them to the hospital. If there's other resources available that can better serve those patients. So,
Hey, Chief, if we can pause here for a second, this is something have been incredibly interested in for a variety of reasons. I have two questions. One, I think my goal this budget with these decision packages is to make sure you get the resources you need to meet. You've got to be able to scale. That the inputs that are coming into the system that are dependent on EMS and the calls that you have to respond to, we have to find a way to scale so you can meet that need. I get it. I am keenly interested in this, but for me, the order of priority is I got to get my view is I want to try to get you the resources you need to scale to meet need and operate the operations of our community. I guess my question here is there a way we could run a pilot program of sorts? I want to get us on a glide path towards this instead of just flip the switch and do it in this budget cycle. Is there a way to get on a glide path, particularly with what's happening down in a big part of my district in the Midtown area with the MAC and Second Light? Is there a glide path that we can get to where we maybe pilot a program of integrated health that could give us some data so we can make a decision on a broader model, maybe in a year, 2 years?
I think there is, and we talked about kind of pivoting that our ICT-1 paramedic into the mobile integrated health role. I
guess my question is,
that's difficult to do, and that's kind of what we wanted to do with the additional. I mean, if we pivot that position, our ask would only be for one more FTE to make that kind of a 7-day-a-week position.
I guess
it's kind of difficult with one position.
I get it.
And as far as the vehicle that we asked for that, we are very tight on those operational support vehicles, but we could probably start piloting a program with the resources we have now and try to get that data. We would like to get that data also to see.
Yeah.
It's not going to, like I said, it's not going to decrease our responses. It's just going to change the way the responses.
Well, I would say two things. One, I know there's some changes that have been made to help specifically target that area and to the increased call demand and everything that's happening there. I would love to be able to formalize what we're doing there under a model on this umbrella so that we can actually get us on a glide path towards this. And we can use that more formally as, okay, this is step one of an integrated model. And we're actually very intentional of what this looks like. That's number one. Number two is another conversation with Via Christi into maybe supporting some sort of and helping in some of these regards. So I'm going to separately make a call and have that discussion. Are we open to a partnership of sorts with them, particularly a funding partnership, is to help?
It's a little difficult when you've partnered with one healthcare agency within the community and not all of them. I think it would be nice to have them all kind of on board.
Okay, good to know.
In this type of partnership. And I think there's probably some public sector folks that would be willing to help.
Okay.
A true mobile integrated health, and like I said, Angela's the expert on this, not me. She could probably talk a lot better. Needs those partnerships and those collaborations with private and public sector to actually get resources that the patients need, because our mobile integrated health paramedic goes out and finds out that this patient's called 20 times in the last month because they've been falling. Okay, what do they really need?
Sure.
They go in, they find out they're falling because they got something wrong, or they got their steps or need repaired or something like that. We have those resources, or they find the resources within the public sector or private sector that would come out and fix that for this person. And now they're not calling anymore because they're not falling.
Okay.
Or maybe they had an issue with medications. They have people that can come bring them medications, or they have those collaborations with those folks that can help out. So.
Okay, very good. That's helpful.
Quick question to follow up. I like your fourth bullet about pivoting So we've ICT one, we've all been around, or some of us been around from the start, and it's
Mhm.
ups and down and migrated into a fairly successful program. But is it matured to where what you're suggesting there is more valuable than having that paramedic on the ICT one?
Yes,
You're
because
both
it
are
would
saying,
still,
well,
I mean, that would still be a part of
yeah,
that,
should-
that person's role, but it's a lot more broad scope
Yeah,
than
yeah.
just mental health.
Okay.
It's community health in general, not just mental health.
I'll support it. Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe Rusty, you probably had.
Yeah, it, as you move toward integrated mental health or integrated health, community paramedic, you have somebody who administratively is going to manage that. I know since we had somebody that did and they moved on to.
Yes,
position
we will have somebody that will manage that internally.
Coordinate. And help
Because there is a lot of,
basically,
like, Angela can talk to that. There's a lot of coordination that goes along with this.
We just closed applications on that position, so we should have that position filled sometime in the next month.
It's great.
as far as ICT one, I think the value in the medic was, and I know they have some data on how often he administers medication, but value was in, if they're treating in place, a lot of times that paramedic can clear the patient medically as opposed to having to go to a facility to have that done.
Right.
That's where it had value was, they put a CommCare, they haven't been medically cleared and they need to be, then they have to go to an ER and get that done before they can go back, or if they're going to jail, they have to go to a medical facility before. So that medical piece, when they're dealing with mental health, behavioral health issues, is important to get them medically cleared without having to go through an ER, which
Sure
extends the time and the cost dramatically.
So these conversations that we're having about pivoting ICT one, where is our partners, particularly at the Wichita Police Department, and where is everybody's head at on this? Is that, do they agree that?
Chief has had conversations with them, and we have another meeting scheduled this Thursday with,
Okay.
With the city side. And,
okay.
So we'll have more information then, but the way that they've described it is if ICT one or any of those mobile response units are out there and they need the medical element, people will be limited in their time, just like ICT one is. ICT one working 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, but these medics would be ones that would be in a position to respond, help them with that patient, and then go back to what other things.
And we have scaled up CommCare's mobile mental health capacity since the inception of ICT one, which I think takes some tension and pressure off.
And I will just kind of clarify, our paramedic can't technically medically clear people. They still would have to see a physician or nurse practitioner, somebody that actually could clear them medically. I mean, we can come out and take vital signs and assess them, but paramedic can't clear them medically. So
can I get a better definition of vulnerable population, high utilizers, and then help me better understand, is this geographic or zip code specific, or I'm just thinking of two positions, what the coverage looks, just trying to understand this model a little bit.
I'll talk about the coverage. The two positions would basically be kind of a pilot. I don't think it would be enough. I mean, to get us going and actually get 7-day-a-week coverage and, hopefully 12-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage to go out and do visits. Because a lot of these would be set up to where they would be referred into this program. I mean, some would be on 911 calls, but some would be people that we do follow-ups on to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be to stay healthy, taking their medications, see if there's any issues going on. So I think that this initially would be kind of a pilot to see how it works, get some data, because I think it could expand a little bit. But this would be a countywide program, knowing that probably the highest incident would be within the core city of Wichita.
And then is it safe to assume that this is going to be a high percentage of uninsured individuals that we're not going to receive compensation for? Is that a
Angela, what do you think? That's a good question.
Potentially. I mean, a lot of these patients do have Medicare and Medicaid, which if we transport, we're billing. So obviously treating in place, we're not receiving that reimbursement yet, but there is opportunity for us to explore that in the future. Vulnerable populations, those are just people that have barriers to medical care. whether it's mental health, just resources, home life situations. We don't like to pinpoint it and call them, specific area of town, or it can happen anywhere.
We have it throughout Sedgwick County. It just seems like there's a high
There's a higher
concentration of-
concentration in certain areas than others, but we wouldn't limit it to a specific sector or a zip code.
Absolutely. I just think there needs to be more of a focus on some of the areas outside of the core that don't necessarily get the attention.
Sure.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few questions. So you said I had 21 students go through the E2P program. Is that graduates or is that current students as well?
Graduates.
Yeah.
And those 21, I assume, were hired by the county then?
Mhm. Yeah, they have to go through the program. Remember, they're tied contractually to the county after the completion. of that
How many
program.
paramedics have we hired that were not part of that program during that same time frame?
I could get you that number. I don't know off the top of my head.
You just ballpark a number? Was there some?
Oh, yeah, there's some that come to us that aren't part of that program. I couldn't give you a ballpark right now. I could find out and let you know. But there are other individuals that are even in the same paramedic classes that are with our E2P students, that there are a small number that aren't affiliated with other EMS agencies that we recruit and have brought on board. There's some that come from out of state, some that come that have previous experience. So it's not just the E2P.
So there's a shortage of paramedics that can fill these positions, and we're always trying to find more, hence the program.
Hmm.
Are there sufficient EMTs to fill our need for EMTs?
We are hiring as many qualified EMTs as we can right now. We just opened up a process and had, I believe, 5 applicants. One just pulled theirs, so we're hiring 4 more right now. But there's not an unlimited supply of EMTs that want full-time employment either. No.
So we're trying to add 6 more EMTs to our staffing table.
Hmm.
What's the
Remember, that'll actually open up more paramedics spots to hire more paramedics if those become available. We want to make sure we have open spots because we're not going to turn away paramedics if we have paramedics that want to come, qualified paramedics that want to come into our service. So.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. So if you have a paramedic that can fill a spot,
Mhm.
you'd rather choose a paramedic over an EMT to fill that spot.
Mhm.
But are there unfilled EMT positions right now because lack of applicants?
You remember, we only have 4 technically EMT positions in our staffing table.
Okay.
So we have a lot more
you can go
EMTs
from
on
4
our
to
staffing
10.
table than we do paramedics. We have a lot more, I think right now. We have 21 EMTs or AMTs on our staffing table. Are there not on a staffing
Those are
table, but
basically
our-
paramedic positions. We didn't have a paramedic.
So we hired EMTs or AMTs to keep trucks on the streets.
And the okay, so there's 4 EMT positions in addition to paramedic positions that we've hired an EMT for those positions because there wasn't a paramedic available. But you mentioned there's 4 EMT positions specifically as well. Are those positions filled?
Because in our staffing table, we have 155 field staff. 151 of those are paramedic positions and 4 EMT positions. These are field providers.
Okay.
And right now we have 121 paramedics filled and 21 EMTs or AMTs and 6 EMTs that are going through the paramedic program right now that are called recruit paramedics while they're going through the process.
I'm really latching onto your words today. So if there's an EMT that we could hire, but there's also a paramedic that we could hire, you would not hire the EMT because you can hire a paramedic and you're trying to get as many paramedics as possible.
Right now we would hire both of them.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to get.
Right now we would hire both of them.
I want some assurance that these.
Because we want to get our staffing table 100% filled.
Okay.
Because we want to add more trucks on the street this year. Our goal is to add at least 2 more 12-hour peak trucks on this year. That is our goal. That was our goal at the outset of this year, with getting the more units to have available to put people on and get enough personnel to add 2 more peak units. And I know I've asked Angela to kind of look at how we are deploying our units, if how we're deploying them and the times that we're deploying them is correct. So when we add those 2 peak units, that we're doing that at the correct time, that'll give us the coverage during the highest call volume period. So
What is the peak time each day? Is it around mid-afternoon, early evening type of thing?
it's, I was gonna say, yeah, there's a great, it kind of, even a little before 8, 7 o'clock, it starts going up and peaking to about 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then after about 8 o'clock at night, I believe it starts coming down a little bit again. And then obviously over the overnight hours between, 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. is our, I don't want to say slowest time, but.
So at those peak times, if we had EMTs,
Mhm.
do we have vehicles, we can deploy those teams right now? If we had EMTs, could you split up the paramedics and have a paramedic with an EMT? Could they become a team and get out and be up? So.
Like I said, we just went through a whole process and we had 4 apply. So, or 5 apply, 1 for full-time EMT and 1 withdrew their application. So we're hiring 4 more. So we're not turning away any EMTs, if that's the question you're asking. I'm not sure if that's the question. We're trying to hire as many as we can, knowing that, and I talked to Rusty about this, the more paramedic EMT trucks we have out there, that increases the workload of our supervisors, our district chiefs, because on high acuity calls, they're going to be having to respond to be that second paramedic to help on those acute calls. And so we're not turning away any EMTs right now either, but there is a saturation point where we can't hire any, because we have to have at least 1 right now in our current model. We have to have at least 1 paramedic on every truck. So
I agree with that.
And that some we're going to have 2, because we have a number of folks that are still going through their probationary period, their orientation period, that have to be with another paramedic during that time.
Does AMR have 1 paramedic or more on each vehicle, or do they do 2 EMT? Do they ever have a 2 EMT?
Here in town or where?
Like in Kansas City, do we know how they operate other places? Butler County?
I think a lot of them, if they're an ALS service, they have to have a paramedic on it. A lot of them are doing paramedic EMTs. But a lot of those, like I said, a lot of those models are different than ours. And we would like to, there are some other changes besides the mobile integrated health for our deployment pattern that we'd like to kind of test out, that I think would help free up some ALS resources.
Commissioner, how would you allow a question on that same
I have
topic?
a number of questions too, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think in my view is I want to be able to support the strategic
Mhm.
plan. And I think we all need to be in alignment of what the strategic plan is so that we can all help support it. Did PPMC do a strategic plan for EM?
We just completed ours
Okay.
and it is out there. I thought was sent. I don't know. I sent it out, but yeah.
Does it address, the question at hand is the ratio between EMTs and paramedics? Does that study address this question, number 1? The second one is where do you want? Like, is like the strategic plan of where we need to develop? Is it a all paramedic truck and we're only using EMTs because we have to, or is this a ratio that we should shoot for? I guess what I'm asking for is a strategic goal that we can support to say, okay, that makes sense. We're going to go for a 3-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1 ratio, or 1-to-1 ratio, which I don't think is practical, but
right now with our current agreements, we have to have a paramedic on every truck.
agreed.
That's something that we'd like to explore in the future, because there are a lot of our calls that are not advanced life support calls. There's a high number that we think we could utilize a different deployment model and free up ALS resources for those highly time critical or those advanced calls that require paramedics.
Based on the last 2 years' budgets, in each of the last 2 years, 2024 and 2025, the commission has authorized the upgrading of field paramedic positions to 151.
Mhm.
going back to just a 4 paramedic or 4 EMT department organization, 4 EMTs, 151 paramedics, which makes that about a 98%. Roughly 98%. If every position was filled and 151 paramedics were filled and 4 EMTs were filled, it would be 98% paramedics, 2% EMTs. And that is the strategic plan that has played out over the last 2 years.
Right. Here's my question.
The work with PPMC was not an
directed at that.
analysis. This was a departmental strategic plan where they got.
Let me dig.
Address some different delivery models.
I'll go one step deeper because I fully understand the challenges that you guys are having, and particularly in my district, Park City, Mays, Valley Center, is you're doing thank you. I know you're doing the best you can, particularly in Valley, to keep that truck there as long as possible. The call volume sucks them into the core of the city. It sucks them into where the volume is happening. Does this model of 98% paramedics to EMTs, does it help us get you what you need to make sure you have the trucks on the streets to eliminate off tracks and zero statuses or reduce those numbers? Does that help that? I want to be able to get the resources where they need so you can meet the need of the community. And if it's paramedics, all paramedics, then I need to know that. If there's a ratio there that we could shoot to, do we need to pivot? Like, I think that's what I need to.
And we've kind of pivoted, but I don't want to say pivoted to paramedic EMT trucks, but just because of the availability of the paramedics, we've kind of had to, because we want to keep as many resources on the street as possible to take care of the call volume. Like I said, it went up 5% last year. The first quarter of 2025, we're up 8%.
Yeah.
So it's not going down.
Our
crews are still running 55 or 0.5, 0.55, 0.6 unit hour utilization, which is about 0.2 or so above where it should be. And that leads to burnout, higher turnover, things like that. So we are trying to get as many trucks, like Commissioner House said, on the street as possible to fill those. And just know if we add 2 more trucks on during peak times, that will help. It's not going to alleviate that. So that's why we're looking at these different models, like the community paramedic model. Like if we could maybe do some BLS trucks out there to take care of some of the non-acute type calls, transfers, things like that, and free up the ALS trucks to be available for those higher acuity calls.
Helpful. Okay.
The equation or the ratio that needs to be solved for is on some level rural response times or suburban response times. For the past several commissions, I mean, the Valley Center ambulance was always a contentious, at least for one commissioner, trying to keep it there as much as possible. But nothing has changed over the years because the call volumes continue to increase. So the ability to leave it sitting, I mean, it's really a matter of
I get that. Yeah.
Staffing to a level where your suburban and rural response times are reduced because you are staffed heavily enough that they don't get pulled in. So it's a matter of how many bodies do you need and how many ambulances do you need to staff in a way so that Wichita population areas are covered and the rural suburban ambulances do not get into the mix as often.
And that's what I'm trying to crystallize so I can.
And to a certain extent, that's an advantage to the CRV vehicles out in Cheney and Clearwater. I mean, it's not getting a transport truck there quicker, but it is getting care started, and those vehicles aren't getting pulled in to the core. I mean, if we get down to status 0 events, yeah, they're getting kind of pulled in every once in a while to make sure there's some coverage. But most of our district chiefs, if they're available, will start running those calls, those low acuity calls, to try to free up trucks. But like we talked about in Valley, we've been cognizant of getting that unit back into Valley, into that area. But to your point, when we're at status events, we only have 3-4 trucks available in the whole county. They're going to get pulled down to where the highest probability of calls are going to be. That's unfortunately into the core, towards the core city of the city. We talked about, would a CRV be beneficial there. You know, that way you would at least have, it would probably stay there, not get pulled in, and have that coverage, ALS provider there to start care, and then a respond unit come in.
Yep.
And we looked at the things, but there is a difference between, like I said, Valley Center and
It's different.
Clearwater. Clearwater, you know, doesn't have during the day. A lot of time their volunteer fire doesn't, you know, isn't available during the day. And so that's a whole township that we're looking at, where Valley Center is. We're just looking at the city of Valley Center. The rest of the county outside of Valley Center is covered by the fire district. So they have that first response outside of the city. So there is some differences there with Valley Center and Clearwater.
So what are some of the similarities and differences when the CRV and the pilot program were just discussed?
The CRV are just for emergency 911 calls. You know, if emergency 911 calls come out, they're responding. The mobile area health is a more in-depth, and actually there's a lot of training, some other things that go on with that position, because I mean, there's a whole community paramedic course that people go through, because it's a different. Angela's paramedics don't get into EMS they get into because they like taking care of patients and delivering care and taking them to the hospital. This is a whole different new realm for EMS that has kind of been evolving throughout the country, really. But they take more time on the scene. They may be there hour more, you know, doing a thorough assessment, doing a thorough exam, doing, you know, finding out history, not only health history, but it's just more in-depth program for these folks that our paramedics don't have time to set on scene and do. They're responding, they're taking care of and leaving. So I'm like, you know, anything else I missed on it?
I think Rusty would have to speak to the reason that CRVs exist, but essentially they were placed because there wasn't an ambulance going to be in that community. So there needed to be some sort of response. When somebody calls 911, they want somebody there to assess their needs. And if the community doesn't have that ability during certain periods of time, it's our responsibility. So CRVs are born of that. It provides that advanced life support care. Mobile integrated health is a completely different thing.
And then going back to the coverage and you know, county being reimbursed, there's probably with the CRV, probably a higher amount of people that have the insurance with that. Would that be correct?
The CRV, it doesn't, right now, we do not bill unless they're transported. So even if the CRV came out,
So it's all.
so if the CRV, yeah, so if the CRV came out and assessed the patient, treated, an ambulance came and transported the patient, the patient or their insurance, whatever, would be billed for that transport. But the CRV came out, assessed the patient, and they decided not to go to the hospital, there would be no charge to that patient. And that's the way it is, whether an ambulance, a CRV, anything comes out at this time, they're not getting any bill unless they're transported.
Do you have a ballpark idea of what percentage the calls do not involve the transport with CRVs?
With CRVs, that's all on our dashboard. I know all the CRV stats are on our dashboard too, with the number of calls, the number of transports. Out in the rural areas like that, there is a higher number of transports than there is obviously in the urban areas. A lot of times we'll call or see things, but there is a higher number of percentage of transports in those areas. So, and I would just like, you know, you talk about costs and the county just, and that's part, and you see in our strategic plan that was put out, some comparisons to Sedgwick County to some other third service or, you know, EMS services, not only around here in the state, but around the nation. And as far as tax subsidy, we're a very lean service for the amount of coverage, amount of care that we provide, a high quality EMS service. So I think we all should be very proud of that when you look at those numbers, how much it's actually costing people who live in Sedgwick County for their EMS service. So,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I was actually going to bring that point up that the CRVs, we don't get paid back for that service at all.
I'm
Is
sorry,
that something that
Commissioner,
the CRVs, when they
Mhm.
provide a service out in the community?
Mhm.
And you made a point though, if there is a transport, that means the ambulance also has to go out to the same scene.
Yes,
Do
they're
the transport-
responded. They're dispatched with the CRVs at the same time.
Well, they
They start out there, and obviously, if the CRV gets on scene and it's not going to be a transport, they'll disregard the ambulance and free them up, and they can get back in or run another call somewhere that's needed. So,
the CRV is a paramedic,
correct,
single person, but one person paramedic.
paramedic, correct.
Is there a fire response as well? If it's a
If-
ALS situation?
If they're available, they will spawn, and we highly encourage them to spawn. I know in Clearwater during the day, they have a hard time getting their volunteers. They're working, doing other things, so they're having a hard time getting coverage. If they are available, they will respond also. I know in Cheney Fire will respond with our CRV out there very, very regularly also.
Since they're not dependable, I hate to say it that way, but they're not dependable.
Mhm.
Does Sedgwick County Fire also respond?
Not unless they're requested. I know out in Cheney, not very often. And they would only be probably requested in a very critical, like a code blue or something like that, that we needed assistance with. CPR,
Cheney also a
things like that.
volunteer
Yes.
fire?
Yeah.
So Cheney did have an ambulance response for a long time, and they got rid of that recently in place of the CRV.
Cheney
Or
is,
not Cheney, Clearwater, excuse me.
and that was back in 2019, 2020. When was the CRVs started, Rusty?
So I'll do this very briefly. The CRVs were stood up as an alternative to in areas that had long ambulance response times. Specifically, when Clearwater shut down their ambulance because they were unable to staff to meet EMS board standards, and they lost their license. We placed a CRV in Clearwater because the response times were on average about 18 to 22 minutes for an ambulance to get there. So if it was a incident where where ALS care was needed, and they were depending on Clearwater's volunteer EMT corps, which some of them are firefighters who live in that area who fill in as volunteers whenever they're at home, but otherwise, if they needed ALS care, CRV would be present and would be on scene generally within less than 5 minutes to provide ALS care until an ambulance could get there, which could take up to 18, 20 minutes. That's the reason that they were and in Clearwater or in Cheney, the same thing. Since their response time from Goddard was about 15 to 18 minutes on average. And if Goddard was out of orders, then it might be longer. The difference being that at that time, and I think even today, Cheney's volunteer fire department does pretty well with medical first response. They serve 3 townships, and they serve, I think, 2 townships on the west side of the county line.
Are they EMT qualified?
They are EMT qualified, and they are credentialed by the Sedgwick County medical director. In Clearwater, the way I understand it is that their EMT, their medical response group, is not necessarily the volunteer fire department. It's still that group of people who were serving as ambulance attendants when they had an ambulance. And so their fire department is not routinely doing medical first response. And really, they try to staff it when if the CRV is not going to be working 12 hours on a given day, then they reach out to their volunteers and try to staff somebody to respond. If the CRV is present, they don't work as diligently to get staffing because they utilize the CRV in Clearwater as medical first response in lieu of fire, which deviates from the model that's in place across the rest of the county. And so the purpose for the CRVs was to have a quick ALS response in those 2 outlying areas where an ambulance would take a longer period of time to get there if they needed ALS care.
And you use the word ALS, meaning primarily CPR, bleeding, airway.
Pushing meds.
Advanced life support, anything
life
out to
But
12 lead.
ambulances have some tools on board that
12 lead,
even the CRV would not have.
CRV has pretty much everything that the ambulance would have on. They have the monitor, airway equipment. They do have a CPR device, everything that the ambulance would have.
Okay, that's good to know.
Just for clarity, Clearwater also is not just Clearwater proper. Clearwater contracts with the Minnesota Township for fire service, and they historically provided Clearwater ambulance service to the township as well. And so the CRV is serving not just Clearwater proper, but for the entire township, because county fire does not respond in Minnesota Township for medical. So you're aware.
I'm going to change topics just slightly. So a few years ago, the hospitals, I'm not sure which hospital at this point, but the hospitals paid for a mobile health physician to do some community medical health assessments, I guess, on behalf of the hospital. So rather than having to go to the emergency room for some of the, the high collar volume residents, if you will, there was a program that was sponsored by the hospital, and we did that for a number of years. Is that still not, is that happening or is it not happening?
No, that program lasted a couple years. That was pretty much specifically aimed toward being heart failure patients and follow up with them post release from the hospital, that they would go out and hopefully reduce the incidence of return visits from those heart failure patients. That was not a true mobile integrated health position.
Did it not do a return on the investment type of thing? Is that why?
Not for us. It may have helped the hospital, but I don't think it really did a whole lot for EMS. Yeah, they
funded it. All right. So if we did add some ambulance teams to the streets, again, I know there's peak volumes here, but if there was an intent saying, if we have breaks between our calls, could they not do some of these community checks while they're already on the streets? Essentially say,
they don't.
If there's a call coming, we're going to change our direction.
Have breaks between their calls very often.
And that's the problem. I agree.
That's why we need to, and these are, like I said, different training, different types of education programs that would, these folks, we don't want just every paramedic going out there and doing that. I mean, we could train them all on that, but that'd be pretty intense to try to train all of our paramedics to the community paramedic model, because there is some other education goes along with that position. So
I got this pretty colored sheet a few minutes ago, and what's our number of ambulances on our peak number today? What's our number?
21 during peak time.
I thought you were going to tell me 21. Well, this says we need 24 this year. We're
the goal. The goal when I presented a couple of years ago was to get up to 25 during.
Yeah, this one says 24 this year, 25 next year, 27 and 27 and 28 and 28. So right now,
that's kind of it. That's the one that is kind of a estimate based on potential, continued call volume and things like that, where we'd need to be. Yes.
That means in 3 years from now, we'll be 7 short. But right now we're 3 short.
The goal would be to increase trucks every year, based on, if we had the people and the resource and the trucks available, would probably get up to that number, that 24, 25 number.
I think
with call volume increasing, we would have to continue increasing so many resources every year to keep up with call volume, unless we can do some different deployment plans or different models, which we would like to look at. Because like I said, just throwing more transport trucks out there to patients that may not need transport isn't solving the problem.
So we haven't talked about a fee adjustment for a while. Is that something we should be talking about? Fee adjustments for?
We just increased them last year.
We are last year, this year.
Just January 1 this year. They just went up. Yes.
I've selective memory apparently. Okay. Do we still provide commodities to fire departments throughout?
Right now, we still do. Yes.
What's the cost of that? service we provide?
I don't have that number in front of me right now. The commodities is kind of exchanged, most like the supplies we use on calls is exchanged on a 1-for-1 basis. We do still supply like gloves, oxygen, AEDs, things like that. And that's basically because we can purchase in bulk and everything in the system is kind of the same. So,
Is there some reason why we don't?
and we
Billing
can get
folks?
reimbursed for it through our user fees and through, insurance and thing like that. We can get reimbursed for those where the fire departments aren't. So that was the thought, was
Kind of-
supplying that.
That's kind of been the historic basis, is that the disposable commodities, since they can bill and get reimbursed, they swap them out 1-for-1. And then the other equipment, historically, there's been an agreement. Of course, the system has grown over the years, but there's an agreement that in order for the fire departments and EMS to be using the same pieces of equipment, so that there's common understanding, common training, common maintenance, all of that. And then during pandemic, we used CARES money to replace all that equipment and provide that equipment to Wichita Fire, County Fire, and one other.
Derby, I believe, also now. Yeah.
So we do need to have a conversation between now and 2028 when some of that expensive equipment goes into life as to how we want to manage that going forward. And we also have a contract with the city of Wichita coming up this year that we need that probably needs to be part of the conversation.
Well, at least find out how much money we're giving away. I'd like to know what we're providing.
Yeah, we can provide you that.
Yes, we can get that.
You mentioned earlier that we can't bill for anything, a service that's less than transport. Is there some law that requires, that
That's
forbids us to?
not entirely true. Angela might have more information. We could for some of our bill for some of our supplies and things like that on refusals.
I'm talking about at the, at patient level. We
Yeah.
show up and do something at the patient level. We spend an hour with them and do whatever, provide some first aid type care. We don't bill for that at all. So I'm questioning why not? What's the barrier?
The CMS reimbursement model for ambulances only pay for transports. There is exploration to see if CMS will reimburse us for treatment in place, because there has been pilot programs that show that it saves CMS, Medicare and Medicaid money from ambulance admissions, but right now they do not reimburse. There are some private entities that reimburse, but if we bill, we have to bill across the board, which means that people with Medicare and Medicaid, if we do not transport them, we're going to bill them and they could then incur a cost out of pocket.
Is that federal or state?
Federal.
And we've chose not to do that, to have those folks that don't incur those costs.
I guess I'm wondering is if we build them and it was not paid by Medicare, Medicaid, and it goes back to the patient, what's wrong with that? I mean, I wish it was covered by those services, but I'm just wondering, there was a service provided. Why not seek reimbursement for the cost?
We can explore that. We have discussed and that would be a conversation with the commission on a different day. To see if
I think
that's
we need to
something-
take a look at that, or again, because this is our service, and I'll just say anecdotally, I'm not happy with the level of service we're providing for EMS. I think we have to do more. It's going to cost more money. The question is, where's the money going to come from? These are the things we need to explore. And then I also just say, with the issue of status 3, 2, 1, and 0, I'd be nice to know. I know we're still lacking data, I'm sure. But it'd be nice to know when those status events happen generally. Is it is there a type of pattern that says in the afternoons we're hitting these numbers at a certain time of the day more often than other times of the day?
No, and it can happen when we're fully staffed and have extra trucks on the street. We've gotten down to those status events. And I'm gonna take back, you said something about not happy with service that we're providing right now. I think I'd like to take a little exception to that, because I think our providers provide an exceptional service out there to the community, and they're doing it day in and day out tirelessly. And you're right. Are we staffed where we need to be with the number of ambulances that we need to be? Probably not, but that's not that we're not trying to do that however we can. And we would really look, like I said, look at some different models to kind of help alleviate some of that, kind of get the right resources to the right patient.
Glad you spoke up because I need to clarify. I'm very proud of EMS, the people we have that do the services, I think we're a very professional service. And I'm very proud of what we have. What I'm not happy about is the fact that we hit these statuses and our people are going from call to call. You said it a few minutes ago. They're running ragged. And for sometimes the next call is on the corner of the county. They got to bring an ambulance from the other corner of the county because that's the only one that's available. So my opinion is this is a management problem. I'm not upset with the people. I'm upset with the fact that we as an organization have not put the money in to get the teams in place to have the response times we expect. And the people out there we serve expect more, and we've got to do better. I'm not upset with the people doing the services. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm very proud of them. I would just say we have got to solve this. I've been talking about this for years now, and I feel like we've got to get above 21 somehow. And I'm not happy with 21. And let me change the question again. Response goals. We used to have a goal when Scott Hadley was our chief of so many, every call would be answered and it had urban, suburban, and rural call response times. Are we doing that now, or we have what Gallagher put in place, which was a one number for everything?
We are in the process of changing that back to suburban, urban, and rural.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah. But know that that's only on priority 1 and priority 2 calls, because there's national studies all over that response times don't really matter except for those highly acute calls. Those are priority 1 and priority 2 calls.
My point is this: when we talk about status 3, 2, 1, and 0, we're talking about an ambulance response specifically. But what I'm saying is, if there's a car accident and someone's bleeding or someone's got some medical emergency and a fire truck is there in 3-4 minutes, an ambulance is still 10 minutes away, we're still calling that a 14-minute response for the ambulance.
We're just measuring our response.
Maybe we're status 1 at the moment that happened. And the reason we had to send the ambulance from 15 miles away is because it's a status 1 event. Okay, great. Why don't we have another set of metrics that includes considers, if you will, our fire response? Because the firefighters are doing the things that can save lives, and I want to recognize them too. I'm very proud of our firefighters. They're trained to do this. CPR. They can deal with bleeding. They can deal with airway. They can do lots of good things in the field, and they're dealing with the most critical parts of life. They're dealing with those. That's why they're trained. We have 40 fire stations in Sedgwick County altogether.
And that's why we have
9,
tiered
which was about
yes.
15, I think. Anyway, 22. I forget the numbers. Anyway, there's 40 fire stations. And at any given moment, there's roughly 200 firefighters that are EMT qualified. Some of them are paramedics as well. And so you think about the ratio, we've got, 21 ambulances at peak volume. We've got 22 people out there on the streets doing, I'm sorry, take that back. 42 people that can provide a service. We have 200 firefighters. So it's a 5-to-1 ratio. So our system is designed that firefighters are going to be there most of the time before the ambulance. And again, when we look at these metrics, it doesn't really consider the firefighter on the scene doing a service. And I don't think it's fair to them. It's really not fair to our messaging to the people we serve. We need to recognize them in these numbers. So I'll wrap. I'm done talking, I guess. I just want to say, I feel like we have to get more trucks on the street. I like the idea of 2 paramedics if we can afford it and if we can find them. But lacking those 2 things, we've got to do what we have to do to get the trucks on the streets. If that means we have to be a 25% EMT organization, then by all means, let's get that done. We've got to get them on the street. And I think we have to step it up. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with that.
Well, I would just say that's the question at hand, I think, is we have funded through our budget 2 paramedic model. And I'm going to listen to the experts, Dr. Brinker, Tom, Rusty, Lindsay. Do we need to formally make a pivot to continue? I agree. We got to get resources on the streets to support you. Should we formally make a pivot to, we're to say, yes, let's move 6 full-time FTE positions, get them operable on the streets pronto. Do we need to formally make a pivot, or should we just stay the course 2 paramedics? I guess that's the question at hand.
The discussion we can have, and I'd like to not only have that discussion, but have the discussion about different deployment models also.
Okay.
Because I think that all goes hand in hand. I don't think just solving more trucks on the street is solving the whole problem.
I would agree. Okay.
Chairman, I'd just like to say, I don't see how 6 solves this problem at all. I think again, talk about a comprehensive plan. Even if we were to hire 6 and actually hire them in, we're not going to get to 24 trucks. If that's our goal,
Mhm.
then our analysis says we need 24 and we're going 25 next year. If that's our goal, then how does 6 even come close to checking that box?
That doesn't, that number was to increase that went along with the increase in the E2P, that we could have those positions available to get more paramedics through the E2P program.
But there was two
If we have-
numbers in the budget. You talked about E2P, 6 more people, and then you also said 6 more EMTs, 2 different things.
Mhm. That correlates with that. That would give us 10 EMT positions in the budget. And if we increase the E2P, that would give us, we could send 10 people through every year for those EMTs.
Okay, that's my misunderstanding then. That's not what I think that said. I think what we need to do right now is hire EMTs.
And we
to
are,
fill the
and
void.
that's, I try to explain that too. We are hiring as many as we can. We just had an application and we got 5 for full time. And we hired 4 of those because 1 dropped out. It's not that we're turning them away. That when your question about if you had an EMT and a paramedic apply, we're hiring them both. We're not hiring one over the other right now.
Just for clarity. Last time Weekly went out, you had 7 vacancies. You
Mhm.
got 4 applications. You had 5, but 1 dropped. You got 4 applications for 7 positions.
Mhm.
They were all EMTs.
But we do have a couple that we're not included in, but 2 paramedics and 1 AMT.
Already factored into that. One will be in July. One is an AEMT. Applications are still open till the 15th, so there's still opportunities for more.
And then if commission added 6 positions, would those be operational or would those be student positions?
Those would all be operational also. Yeah.
So 6 FTEs that are EMTs that'd be operational. We
Mhm.
throw them, we
Yeah.
get them on the trucks. Okay. That's good to know. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Other questions? This has been really helpful. So I appreciate it. I know you guys are running ragged.
Oh, you're fine. Is there any other questions on any of the other
Yeah, I'm going to
items?
dig in a little bit and I'll circle back with everybody and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Tom?
That-
That's it, huh? You sure?
Sure, I'm positive.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for pulling this together so we can dig through some of these things. It's really helpful. Okay. Thank you.
You know.